Chapter 1647. When a person was focused on doing one thing, time always passed very quickly. Chu Luyue and Rong Xiu played chess. 4 hours had passed, but they were only halfway through the game. On the glittering chessboard, the gold and red chess pieces fought against each other. Each of them occupied half of the chessboard, and the battle was intense. However, Chu Luyue's emotions had indeed calmed down during the process. Moreover, the long-awaited battle with Rong Xiu had given Chu Luyue a lot of enlightenment. When the sky was slightly brighter, the game had finally reached its final stage. Pa! Chu Luyue's eyes were shining brightly when she finished her word. After a sleepless night, not only did she not look dispirited, but she also seemed to be in high spirits. Her eyes were fixed on the chessboard, but her mind was spinning crazily. In this short period of time, she had already rehearsed countless possibilities. Rong Xiu lifted his eyelids slightly and glanced at her. Seeing her eyes shining, he could not help but chuckle. After so long, she had not changed at all. Pa! Rong Xiu waved his wrist gently, and a golden chess piece condensed from force suddenly flew out from his slender white fingers and landed on the chessboard. In an instant, the situation on the chessboard changed drastically. It was as if 2 dragons of equal strength were fighting fiercely. They were originally evenly matched, but at this moment, a sword suddenly pierced through the air. It directly cut off the dragon head on Chu Luyue's side. One move, the outcome was decided. Chu Luyue was suddenly stunned, and her eyes widened slightly. Rong Xiu's move was not within all the scenarios that she had rehearsed before. He had directly killed her without batting an eyelid. Her eyes were fixed on the chessboard. At this moment, she realized that Rong Xiu had already set up a trap, and was only waiting for her to walk into it step by step. She mistakenly thought that the combat strength of both sides was equal, but in fact, she was already under the control of her opponent. Bang! The chessboard shattered into countless specks of light that quickly dissipated. Chu Luyue remained rooted to the ground, as if he hadn't recovered from his shock. Rong Xiu was about to step forward when Chu Luyue suddenly said, "Rong Xiu, protect me first. I need to think about something." Rong Xiu raised his eyebrows slightly. Since it was his wife's order, he naturally had to comply. All right. He didn't move forward and just stood there with his hands behind his back, waiting patiently. Chu Luyue sat cross-legged with his hands on his knees. He closed his eyes and held his breath. A complicated Xian formation quietly appeared in his mind. Then, the second one, the third one, more and more profound formations appeared. At a certain moment, Chu Luyue finally began to attempt to connect these profound formations together. These were the profound formations that she had learned from Debao in the past. Strictly speaking, they were more or less similar to the Sky Shuttle formation. Previously, she had always wanted to establish a connection between these profound formations and gradually figure out the mysteries of the Sky Shuttle formation, but she had never succeeded. However, after playing this game of chess with Rong Xiu tonight, she instantly understood something. Vaguely, she seemed to have touched an invisible barrier. Chu Luyue's brows twitched slightly. That was the threshold of a great Xian imperial teacher. Even someone as arrogant as Chu Luyue was stunned at this moment. She never thought that she would actually be able to touch the opportunity to break through to a great Xian imperial teacher in such a short time. Although she had already successfully broken through to become a great Xian imperial teacher some time ago. There was a huge gap between a great Xian imperial teacher and a great Xian imperial teacher. Even Elder Huafeng had stayed in the great Xian imperial teacher for decades before finally breaking through that threshold and officially becoming a great Xian imperial teacher. And it had only been a few months for her. It was too exaggerated. Perhaps it was because she had already memorized countless high-level profound formations a few years ago. Perhaps it was because she had forcefully repaired the Sky Shuttle formation. Or perhaps it was because of the fight with Rong Xiu that she suddenly understood. In short, the surprise came too quickly. Since an opportunity had fallen from the sky, she naturally had to grasp it tightly. At this moment, a ray of white appeared on the horizon. Rong Xiao looked up slightly, and there seemed to be waves surging in his eyes that disappeared in an instant. At the same time, in another place in the god-slaying tomb, there were also a few people slowly moving forward. Elder Wu Peng, let's rest for a while. Nan Yi looked at Nan Yuxing beside her. Seeing his pale face, her heart ached. Elder Wu Peng frowned slightly. Before he could speak, Nan Yuxing shook his head. We'll be there soon. Let's go over directly. Nan Yi had been crying all the way. At this moment, her eyes were already red and swollen like walnuts, and her pupils were also bloodshot. But big brother, your body, previously in the Red Soul Forest, Nan Yuxing was surrounded by those red leaves. It took them a lot of effort to finally escape. However, the two elders and Nan Yi were injured. Needless to say, Nan Yuxing almost lost his life when he went in. He was covered in wounds from head to toe, and there was not a single unscathed spot on his body. Those red leaves were also poisonous. If the two elders had not brought him out in time and used extremely precious pills, Nan Yuxing would probably still be unconscious. Along the way, Elder Baitong and Elder Wu Peng had been supporting Nan Yuxing in turn. Elder Baitong hesitated for a moment and also persuaded. Eldest young master, the thing is in the god-slaying tomb anyway. Since we've already entered, there's no need to rush. Right now, your body is more important. Nan Yuxing gritted his teeth. He knew that they were doing this for his own good. However, the more they did this, the more it reminded him of how pathetic he was at this moment. He had always been proud, and he had never been in such a sorry state. No need, he struggled to walk forward, but his legs suddenly gave way and he fell to the ground. Eldest young master. Big brother. Elder Baitong and Nan Yi were both worried and hurriedly supported him. Elder Wu Peng clenched his fists in his sleeves and finally spoke. Eldest young master, you should stop and rest for a while. There's still some poison in your body that hasn't been cleansed. If you move forward rashly, I'm afraid it's not good for you. When Elder Baitong heard this, he hurriedly agreed. Nan Yuxing had no choice but to nod. Just as they were about to stop and rest, Elder Baitong glanced out of the corner of his eye and suddenly saw a somewhat familiar tall figure in the distance. The sky was about to brighten, and he stood in the morning light like a banished immortal. It's him. Not far in front of him, a woman in red was sitting cross-legged and seemed to be cultivating. It was the two people from before. Elder Baitong's voice attracted the attention of the other three people. Nan Yuxing looked up. When he saw the two figures clearly, endless anger and resentment surged from the bottom of his heart. If it weren't for them, how would he have fallen to such a state? Kill them. Kill them. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1648. He was agitated and the blood in his body was surging. Just as he finished speaking, he spat out a mouthful of blood. Elder brother. Nan Yi retracted her gaze and saw her elder brother's increasingly pale face and the blood at the corner of his mouth. Her heart was in a mess. It's all my fault. It's all my fault. As Nan Yi spoke, her tears gushed out again. She bit her lips tightly and a fishy taste filled her mouth. If she hadn't been so willful, her elder brother wouldn't have. Eldest young master, your body is still very weak now. There's no hurry to take revenge. It won't be too late for us to kill them after you recover. Elder Wu Peng was still expressionless, but his voice was colder and filled with a strong murderous intent. Nan Yuxing slowly wiped the blood at the corner of his mouth and stared at the two figures for a long time before he finally said hatefully. All right. Let them live for a while longer. Anyway, they were already at the god-slaying tomb. No matter what, those two people couldn't escape from their control. Elder Bai Tong and Nan Yi helped him to the side to rest and took out another pill for him to consume. This is the last pure jade pill. After consuming it, Wu Peng and I will work together to help you completely remove the remaining poison. Your body will recover by 50 to 60%. As Elder Bai Tong spoke, an orange flame surged out of his palm. Bang! He slapped Nan Yuxing's back. The scorching heat instantly spread throughout his body. Nan Yuxing let out a muffled groan. His originally bloodless face instantly flushed red. At the same time, Elder Wu Peng walked to his side and 2 silver needles appeared in his hand. Eldest young master, bear with it. As he spoke, he had already pierced the 2 silver needles into Nan Yuxing's index fingers. Soon, black and red blood gushed out from his hands and dripped down the silver needles. Nan Yuxing's eyes were tightly shut. His body was cold and hot for a while. The torture made him tremble all over. Nan Yi watched from the side and sobbed softly. Looking at her elder brother's painful appearance, she couldn't help but look back. Her red eyes were filled with bone-chilling resentment. She must take revenge for this. Rong Xiao was watching Chu Luyue cultivate when suddenly, he heard a clamor. He turned his gaze slightly and glanced at him indifferently. Oh, so it's them, she was really haunting him. Murderous intent flashed across Rong Xiao's eyes, but it disappeared quickly. Then, he retracted his gaze and looked at Chu Luyue again. With a wave of his sleeves, a golden line rapidly swam across the ground. That golden line was extremely thin, and it was hidden in the ground. If one did not look carefully, it would be difficult to detect it. About an hour later, the blood on Nan Yuxing's hands finally turned from black to red. As for the 2 silver needles, they had turned completely black. Elder Wu Peng pulled out the 2 needles and pulverized them with a surge of origin power in his palm. Elder Bai Tong finally removed his hand from Nan Yuxing's back and heaved a sigh of relief. Alright, the poison in eldest young master's body has been completely removed. As long as he recuperates, he will recover in 10 days. Due to the pain, Nan Yuxing was drenched in sweat and looked extremely miserable. 10 days, hearing Elder Bai Tong's words, he lowered his head and muttered as he clenched his fists. Ever since he became a high god, he had never suffered such a serious injury. But this time, he was tricked by 2 people whose names and identities he didn't even know. How could he take this lying down? Elder Bai Tong had followed him for many years. How could he not know what he was thinking? His lips moved before he said, actually, the leaves of the Scarlet Soul Forest are extremely poisonous. Fortunately, eldest young master has been taking medicinal baths all year round. That's why he could survive until now. If it was an ordinary person, I'm afraid he wouldn't be able to survive. Nan Yuxing didn't feel comforted at all. In his opinion, if it wasn't for Chu Luyue and Rong Xiao, he would have already left the Scarlet Soul Forest. How could he have suffered such an injury? He had completely forgotten that they were the ones who had caused trouble for others first. He took a deep breath and suppressed the surging emotions in his heart. He stood up and looked ahead. Suddenly, he frowned. Why are there only 2 people over there? Wasn't there another man with them? Oh right, and that little girl. He gritted his teeth as he said the last sentence. Elder Bai Tong and the others only realized that something was wrong after he said that. Yeah, could they be hiding? Elder Wu Peng looked over and shook his head. There are only 2 of them in the vicinity. Did they get lost? Or? Nan Yuxing's mind flashed with countless guesses. Then, he sneered, no matter what, they deserve it. They were outnumbered. Under such circumstances, it was even easier to deal with those 2 people. The god-slaying mound was full of dangers. It was normal for them to get lost or have accidents. These people had overestimated themselves. Who could they blame? Just as he was about to step forward, Elder Wu Peng stopped him. First young master, let's wait for a while. Nan Yuxing frowned. What are we waiting for? Those two people are right in front of us. It's easy to go over and kill them. What's there to hesitate and wait for? Elder Wu Peng glanced at him. Have you forgotten where we are? Nan Yuxing's expression changed slightly. Yes, this was the tomb of the supreme god experts. It was extremely difficult for ordinary people to enter this place. Even a supreme god expert might not be able to reach this place in such a short time. Let alone those two people. More importantly, they didn't seem to be injured. Could it be, they have a way to get here directly? Sure enough, they were also here for that thing. Nan Yuxing's expression changed. Elder Wu Peng pondered for a while. We can't be sure about this yet, but we can be sure that they are very capable or have extraordinary treasures on them. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been able to reach this place unscathed. Also, this old man has no clue as to the identity of that little girl. Speaking of this, Elder Wu Peng frowned tightly. This question had been bothering him for a long time, but he still couldn't find an answer. That little girl looked like she was only 3 or 4 years old, but her combat power was shocking. She could send Nan Yuxing flying with a punch without using her force. Most importantly, the little girl had never shown her face before. She just had to appear when the eldest young master was about to kill that woman. It was too strange. Nan Yuxing gritted his teeth. That little girl is definitely in disguise. He still remembered the taste of that punch. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1649. Are you sure? Elder Wu Peng asked. Of course. Nan Yuxing's answer was resolute. If it wasn't a disguise, there was no way to explain how a 3- or 4-year-old girl could have such terrifying physical strength. It wasn't that he had never seen cultivators with innate divine strength, but he had never seen one who was so heaven-defying. It must be some powerful cultivator who was pretending. As for her sudden appearance, she must have teleported over. Otherwise, how else could it be explained? Elder Wu Peng exchanged glances with Elder Bai Tong when he heard this. Both of them could see the disapproval in each other's eyes. But, when that girl appeared, there were no spatial or force fluctuations. Even a god-level cultivator couldn't teleport like this. Nan Yuxing choked and his expression turned even uglier. If that's the case, then isn't that girl's appearance too strange? Elder Bai Tong suddenly said. Actually, I feel that the way that girl appeared is very similar to a magical beast. Only when summoning one's contracted magical beast could one be so swift and silent. Moreover, the physical strength of magical beasts was indeed generally stronger than that of cultivators. How is this possible? Nan Yuxing felt that this guess was ridiculous. Only 2 ancient divine beasts in the world can transform into human form. Even so, when they appeared, they would at least appear in the form of a young man. Why would they appear in the form of a little girl? The 2 elders didn't say anything. This was the only thing they couldn't figure out. Other than that, everything else about that little girl was too similar. Nan Yi suddenly took a step forward. Big brother, now is indeed a good time for us to make a move. Nan Yuxing looked at her strangely. What? Nan Yi raised her chin. Look at what that woman is doing. Hearing this, everyone turned to look at him. After a moment, Nan Yuxing's expression changed slightly. Is she preparing to break through? That's right. And, if I'm not wrong, she's a Xian master. Nan Yi gritted her teeth. Although the distance between them was a little far, Nan Yi was also a Xian master, so she was extremely sensitive to this. She guessed that the other party must be breaking through as a Xian master. I just don't know what level she's preparing to break through to. Nan Yuxing sneered. What's so important about that? In any case, after today, all of this would become nothing. Breaking through is good. At this moment, she was undoubtedly at her weakest. Although the man beside her was a king of blacksmiths, he was still only one person. He was definitely no match for them. Was there a better time to strike than now? Nan Yuxing glanced at the two elders beside him. Elder Baitong, Elder Wupeng, you won't stop me this time, right? The two elders looked at each other and nodded. Since that's the case, it's better to get rid of him as soon as possible. They started walking towards Rongxiu and Chu Luyue. This place was flat and spacious. The scattered tombstones were not enough to cover their figures. But they never thought about this and just went straight ahead. His opponent was nothing to worry about. He could just kill him directly. Why waste time and energy on other things? Rongxiu naturally heard their movements, but he didn't take it to heart. He stood in front of Chu Luyue, waiting quietly and patiently. Breaking through from a mystic imperial master to a great mystic imperial master was definitely not that simple. So before she broke through, he would help her get rid of all distracting factors. What a coincidence! Nan Yuxing sneered. His eyes moved between Rongxiu and Chu Luyue with undisguised killing intent. I didn't expect that we would meet here again. Rongxiu ignored him. He didn't even look at him. Such an indifferent attitude angered Nan Yuxing more than contempt and mockery. The smile on his face quickly faded and was replaced by a layer of coldness. I'm talking to you, didn't you hear me? Rongxiu raised his eyebrows and glanced at him lazily. Don't disturb others when they are busy. Don't you understand such a simple principle? You impudent. Nan Yuxing knew that the other party was arrogant and impudent, but he didn't expect him to be so bold in such a situation. Was he too confident in himself, or did he not realize the danger he was facing? To be able to come here, you do have some ability. Unfortunately, that's all. Nan Yuxing took a deep breath and revealed a sinister smile. If you kneel down and beg for mercy now, I will spare your corpses. Hearing this, Rongxiu raised his eyebrows. He hadn't heard anyone speak to him like this for a long time. What if I say no? Nan Yuxing was so angry that he laughed. You really don't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Even if you want to beg for mercy later, you won't have such a chance again. Rongxiu suddenly raised his eyes and looked at the sky. Then, he looked at them with a faint smile. You can't afford to offend me. I'm not interested in your lives. For Nan Yifan's sake, I'll let you go this time. But, my patience is limited. If you do this again, I won't be so polite anymore. Hearing this, Nan Yuxing and the others' faces changed. Because Nan Yifan was Nan Yuxing and Nan Yi's father, and also their patriarch. They looked at each other and saw the shock and suspicion in each other's eyes. This man seemed to know their identities like the back of his hand. And from his tone, it seemed like his identity wasn't ordinary either. Otherwise, he wouldn't have called Nan Yifan by his name. Who are you? Nan Yuxing's face was extremely ugly. He thought that the other party was an ignorant and fearless lackey, but now it seemed that he wasn't. Elder Baitong suddenly thought of something. Rongxiu. Rongxiu. Wait. He suddenly raised his head and stared at Rongxiu in disbelief. You're the Yuntian Tower's holy son, Rongxiu. They had heard the woman call him that before, but they didn't care at that time. On one hand, they weren't familiar with the Yuntian Tower and Rongxiu. They had never seen them before, so they didn't think about it at all. On the other hand, there were countless people with the same name in the world. It was impossible for them to recognize one person immediately, right? It wasn't until now that Rongxiu took the initiative to mention Nan Yifan's name that they realized that something was wrong. Nan Yuxing's expression changed a few times, and finally revealed a ruthless look. Heh, the Yuntian Tower's holy son. Is he that amazing? Since you know our identity, you should kneel down and beg for mercy. In the Divine Ruins world, other families and sects might be afraid of the Yuntian Tower, but they weren't. This Rongxiu knew their identity, but he was still so arrogant. If he didn't die, who would? Rongxiu pinched the bridge of his nose. Now, he felt a little pity for Nan Yifan. He actually gave birth to such a brainless successor. He raised his eyes, looked at the few of them, and asked softly, "So, you guys don't want to leave? So, you're saying that you don't want to leave?" Chapter 1650. He spoke slowly and calmly, his expression calm and even gentle. However, when these words entered their ears, they inexplicably felt a chill run down their spines. Meeting that pair of deep and bottomless phoenix eyes, Nan Yuxing suddenly felt an inexplicable fear in his heart. However, this emotion was quickly suppressed by him. He was the young master of the Nan family. Why would he be afraid of a Yuntian tower? Rongxiu, I know that you've become famous in the Divine Ruins world in the past few years. I admit that you're indeed powerful. Otherwise, you wouldn't have reached your current position. Unfortunately, there's one thing you don't know. There are some people that you can't afford to offend. As Nan Yuxing spoke, he shouted at the two elders. Let's end this quickly. As long as they killed these two people, no one would know that they were the culprits. They would bury this news forever. However, Elder Wu Peng frowned slightly. Young master, I'm afraid this is a little inappropriate. Although he didn't know much about Rongxiu, he had heard some rumors about him. His methods were ruthless and decisive. He was indeed a ruthless character. The most important thing was that what he said just now didn't seem to be an act. To be able to say the name of the patriarch directly, he wasn't ordinary. Moreover, he did it so casually. Could it be that this Rongxiu really knew the patriarch? Nan Yuxing was instantly dissatisfied. Elder Wu Peng, you've always been swift and decisive. Why are you so hesitant today? The other party had already bullied them to such an extent. If they still didn't retaliate, they would be laughed at. It was just killing two people. What kind of trouble could it cause? Elder Wu Peng's lips moved. He wanted to persuade a little more, but Elder Bai Tong hurriedly gave him a look. What was there to argue about? The second miss was humiliated by them and the young master lost half his life. Even if the patriarch was here, he would definitely choose to take action. Besides, they could just kill them and dispose of their bodies without anyone knowing. No one in the world would know. What was the point of worrying so much? Elder Wu Peng's expression was cold. In the end, he swallowed the rest of his words. Whoosh! A greenish-black sickle appeared in Elder Wu Peng's hand. The cold light was biting cold, extremely sharp. First young master and second miss, please step back. Elder Wu Peng said in a deep voice. Elder Bai Tong took a step forward at the same time, the origin power around him surging. From the looks of it, they were clearly going to fight to the death. Rongxiu glanced at them indifferently, then retracted his gaze, as if he didn't care about the situation. His attitude finally enraged the two elders. Go! Elder Wu Peng bellowed and took the lead to charge forward. Boom! Elder Bai Tong flicked his sleeve. An orange flame condensed into a long whip and shot straight at Chu Luyue. However, right at this moment, Elder Bai Tong suddenly felt a sharp pain come from his leg. He immediately lowered his head to look, and his pupils shrank. At some point in time, his ankle had been entangled by a golden thread. The thread was as thin as hair, and it had appeared silently without any energy fluctuations. That was why he didn't notice it and didn't even know that he had been entangled. A ball of flame appeared in his hand again, and he wanted to burn it directly. However, what shocked Elder Bai Tong was that the golden thread was extremely tough. His flame had no effect on it at all. In fact, as the flame burned, the power in it was inexplicably gradually devoured by the golden thread. The golden thread tightened. There was a sharp pain, and dark red blood stains gradually seeped through his clothes. Elder Baitong was even more shocked. How could the golden thread be so powerful? Although he specialized in celestial physician, he was also a high god in terms of cultivation. Moreover, with the help of pills, his physical strength was stronger than ordinary cultivators of the same level. Why was he injured by the golden thread now? Elder Baitong sensed the danger. With a flick of his wrist, he withdrew the flame whip and began to deal with the golden thread around his ankle with all his strength. However, things didn't go as he wished. The golden thread began to spread upward at an even faster speed. In a short while, his entire calf was tightly wrapped by the golden thread. Moreover, the golden thread continued to tighten throughout the process. More and more blood stains appeared on Elder Baitong's body. He finally panicked. What the hell was this? Swoosh! A greenish-black blade of light flashed past. Elder Wu Peng had sensed the danger on his side and changed direction midway to attack. The sharp scythe slashed down fiercely. The golden thread broke silently. Elder Baitong finally heaved a sigh of relief. Wu Peng, thank you, be careful. Before he could finish his sentence, Elder Baitong's eyes suddenly widened as he exclaimed. Elder Wu Peng focused his gaze and saw that the broken golden thread had split into two and was wrapping around the two of them. In the blink of an eye, Elder Wu Peng's scythe was wrapped by the golden thread. Moreover, it was still spreading toward Elder Wu Peng. Elder Wu Peng was about to swing his scythe when he realized that under the entanglement of the golden thread, his scythe seemed to have increased by thousands of kilograms, making it difficult to swing. Every single movement became extremely difficult. Nan Yuxing and Nan Yi, who were watching from behind, were also shocked when they saw this scene. How could this Rong Xiu be so strong? At this moment, Chu Luyue frowned slightly. Rong Xiu's expression turned cold. I already said that you're not allowed to disturb my wife's cultivation. He raised his wrist and suddenly pulled. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1651. The extremely flexible golden thread instantly tightened. Then, it directly dragged the greenish-black sickle out of Elder Wu Peng's hand. Elder Wu Peng was caught off guard, and his yuan item was easily taken away by Rong Xiu. Then, the sickle flew to Rong Xiu under everyone's gaze. With a wave of his hand, the sickle appeared in his hand. The heaven-breaking sickle. If I remember correctly, this should be the first King Divine weapon that Elder Wu Peng made, right? It was also because of this that Elder Wu Peng finally became a King Divine weapon refiner. Therefore, even though Elder Wu Peng was already a venerable weapon refiner, he still valued this divine weapon very much. Elder Wu Peng's half-frozen face became even colder. This Rong Xiu, how did he even know about this? Swoosh! A dagger suddenly appeared in Rong Xiu's other hand. The dagger was only the length of one's hand. The handle was black and heavy, but the blade was as thin as a cicada's wing and almost transparent. Under the sunlight, it shone faintly. Elder Wu Peng's heart skipped a beat. Crack! A crisp breaking sound was heard. It was Elder Wu Peng's sickle, which had been directly cut in half by Rong Xiu's dagger. The cut surface was neat and smooth. Rong Xiu seemed to have destroyed Elder Wu Peng's most beloved King Divine weapon without any effort. He raised his eyebrows slightly and raised his eyes slightly. He said with a faint smile, Elder Wu Peng, it seems that your King Divine weapon is not that great. Elder Wu Peng's face instantly darkened. Rong Xiu. How dare you? The number of King Divine weapons that he had refined in his lifetime was no less than 5. However, among them, the one that he valued the most was this heaven-breaking scythe. Even though he was now a venerable weapon refiner, he still valued this King Divine weapon very much. Back then, he had been stuck as a high-level weapon refiner for many years, but he was still unable to break through the threshold of a King Divine weapon refiner. Over time, this had almost become his inner demon. Later on, under a series of coincidences, he finally succeeded in refining this king artifact. Not only did he successfully break through his shackles, he even broke through his own predicament. From then on, his path of cultivation was unimpeded. It was because of this that he attached great importance to this heaven-breaking scythe. Now that Rong Xiao had destroyed it in front of him, how could he not be angry? How could he swallow this anger? However, in addition to his hatred, there was also a deep shock in his heart. The dagger in Rong Xiao's hand was small and agile. It did not look much different from an ordinary dagger. But just now, he had easily destroyed a king divine artifact. In other words, this dagger was either an outstanding emperor artifact, or... Ah! A shrill scream suddenly came from the side. Elder Wu Peng was shocked and hurriedly turned his head to look. He saw that Elder Baitong's calf had been tightly wrapped by the golden thread again. And from the looks of it, it was even worse than the previous time. His clothes were messy with bloodstains, and his flesh and blood could be vaguely seen from the wound. It was a ghastly sight. Elder Baitong's face was pale, and he almost fainted from the pain. The golden thread was not ordinary. Not only could it easily cut through flesh, but the edges of the wound also carried extreme burning pain. The golden thread tightened, and where it tightened, it was as if there were red-hot iron rods scraping past his body. Sizzle, a scalp-numbing burning sound came. Elder Baitong trembled as he lowered his head to take a look. For a moment, his mind was blank. Burn wounds had actually appeared on his legs. His skin, blood, and flesh were even terrifyingly charred. Elder Baitong began to struggle desperately, using all his strength to try to break free. But no matter what he did, the golden thread would not disperse. Every time it was broken, it would become stronger and more numerous. One of the threads suddenly tightened. An ice-cold pain instantly spread throughout his body. Half of Elder Baitong's calf had been silently sliced apart. The incision on the wound was very neat, and even the ghastly white bone could be seen. This scene deeply agitated Elder Baitong, causing him to be shocked and angry. Deep in his heart, there was also a strong sense of fear that spread. Many emotions surged, and finally, he could not bear it anymore. His chest shook violently, and he spat out a mouthful of blood before falling heavily to the ground. Bang! With a muffled sound, smoke and dust rose from the ground. Elder Baitong, Nan Yuxing and Nan Yi finally regained their senses, and they could hardly believe their eyes. The two elders attacked together, but they were actually at a disadvantage? Rong Xiao, how did he do it? Elder Wu Peng stared at the wound on Elder Baitong's body and gradually clenched his fists. Baitong was a celestial physician, and he could transform his force into flames to refine pills. Therefore, ordinary flames could not hurt him at all. But now, he was burned by a golden thread, and half of his leg was directly cut off by the other party. This Rong Xiao was clearly more terrifying than the rumors. Just what level had his strength reached? Elder Wu Peng was about to speak, but Rong Xiao suddenly raised a finger. There was a clear light in his deep eyes, but the expression between his brows was distant, disdainful, and indifferent. Elder Wu Peng suddenly seemed to be strangled by something, and the rest of his words were silently crushed in his throat, and he could no longer say anything. In Chu Liuyue's mind, several xian formations were arranged in a disorderly and picturesque manner. Each xian formation was shining brightly, and its might was awe-inspiring. However, they were all separated from each other by a great distance. A stream of light flew out from the xian formation in the middle, and quickly connected with the xian formation beside it. Then, a second and third one followed. Chu Liuyue's heart unconsciously tensed up. She wanted to connect all these xian formations together, but it was not easy to do so. She could no longer remember how many times she had tried, and her physical and mental strength were greatly depleted. The only consolation was that her results would be more outstanding than the previous time. It was also this that supported Chu Luyue to grit her teeth and persevere. More and more Xian formations were connected. The might on them also began to stack layer upon layer. Finally, there was only one Xian formation left. Chu Luyue subconsciously held her breath, and her mind was extremely tense. She knew too well what it meant if she succeeded this time. If she did not experience it personally, even she would not believe that someone could attempt to break through from a Xian Emperor Master to a great Xian Emperor Master in just a few months. Bang bang. Bang bang. Chu Luyue's heart was beating rapidly, and it was almost about to jump out of her chest. But actually, thinking about it carefully, this matter was also within reason. Because she had already become a Xian Emperor Master a few years ago. Countless incomparably mysterious Xian formations were recorded in her mind. She could not help but thank Dabeo for this. If not for him, she would not have been able to reach this step so quickly. Chu Luyue's thoughts moved. The last stream of light flew out lightly, and tightly connected with the last Xian formation. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1652. Crack. An indistinct but clear shattering sound could be heard. Chu Luyue suddenly opened her eyes. In an instant, there seemed to be stars flickering in the depths of her eyes, incomparably resplendent. An indescribable pressure spread out from her body. A great mystic king teacher. Rong Xiu's thin lips curled up slightly. He knew that she could succeed. This matter might be as difficult as ascending to the heavens for ordinary people. But to Chu Luyue, who had repaired the sky shuttle formation before, it was much easier. However, this scene caused the nearby first-tier people to be dumbstruck. This aura is, Nan Yi was a mystic master and had good talent, so she was especially sensitive to this. Her eyes widened slightly, and her face was filled with disbelief. That woman looked to be only 17 or 18 years old. How could she have broken through to a great mystic king teacher? Even she, who was already 24 years old, had yet to see the threshold of a great mystic king teacher. She couldn't help but grab Nan Yuxing's sleeve. Big brother, did I sense wrongly? Nan Yuxing's expression was extremely ugly. Although he wasn't a mystic master, he had seen many mystic masters. That woman had indeed broken through to a great mystic king teacher. If he hadn't seen it with his own eyes, even he wouldn't have believed that there was such a young great mystic king teacher in this world. Moreover, she seemed to have broken through in less than a day. She must have used some method. Nan Yuxing gritted his teeth. When Nan Yi heard this, she dispelled the last bit of hope in her heart. Method. How was that possible? Martial artists might be able to use some method to forcefully increase their strength and realm within a certain period of time. But it was absolutely impossible for a mystic master. She had broken through, so it was true. Nan Yi's body swayed and she almost fell to the ground. Everything in front of her was too big a blow to her. First, Elder Baitong and Elder Wu Peng were suppressed by Rong Xiu one after another. Then, that woman broke through to become a great mystic king teacher. If she still had a certain amount of pride in this aspect before and thought that she was more outstanding than the other party, all of this had been shattered now. Elder Wu Peng had just finished treating Elder Baitong's injuries. When he sensed the commotion, he lifted his head to take a look. His eyes were deep. At this point, if they still underestimated the Rong Xiu duo, they would be extremely stupid. Nan Yuxing couldn't help but take a step forward. Elder Wu Peng, we can't let them live. Elder Wu Peng frowned with complicated emotions in his eyes. Of course, he knew that if he allowed the two of them to leave, there would be endless trouble in the future. But, Nan Yuxing and Baitong were severely injured, and Nan Yi was clearly weaker than the other party. Even if he went all out, he might not be able to finish them off before the two of them sent out the news. If word of this got out, they would still be in trouble. At that time, the situation would only get worse. More importantly, they had come to the Godslayer mound in search of that thing. He had yet to find the item, but he was already heavily injured. If it was delayed because of this, then, the gains would not make up for the losses. Elder Wu Peng lowered his eyes and glanced at Elder Bai Tong. Bai Tong, what do you think? Elder Bai Tong's face was pale and resentful. No one would be able to accept having their calf chopped off so easily. Not to mention someone like Elder Bai Tong. He had never thought that after being so powerful for so long, he would be defeated by such a young man in the end. He wanted to take revenge more than anyone else. But, he also knew what Elder Wu Peng was thinking. After hesitating for a while, Elder Bai Tong finally gritted his teeth and said, "Let's go back first, Elder Bai Tong." Nan Yuxing suddenly interrupted him, almost thinking that he had heard wrongly. He had lost a part of his calf. And now he was planning to let it go? Elder Bai Tong closed his eyes. How could he not want revenge? But in the current situation, leaving first was the best choice. After finding that thing and completing the mission given by the Patriarch, wouldn't they have plenty of time and opportunities to look for the two of them? Nan Yuxing gradually clenched his fists. At first, he only wanted to find trouble with them and teach them a lesson because they had humiliated his sister. But now, they had suffered losses and been humiliated by the other party. Nan Yuxing, who was used to being high and mighty, could not accept this. He slowly looked up. Chu Luyue had completely woken up from her breakthrough state. She had just stood up when Rong Xiao walked over. "Congratulations, you, The coldness in his eyes melted at this moment and was replaced by a gentle smile. Chu Luyue also smiled, her eyes curved. "It's all thanks to your guidance. If not for that game of chess with Rong Xiao, she did not know when she would be able to comprehend and break through." Rong Xiao raised his eyebrows, bowed his head slightly, looked into her eyes seriously, and asked with a low smile. "Then, is there a reward?" The two of them were very close at this moment. When he spoke, a warm breath and a faint cold fragrance silently wrapped around Chu Luyue. Chu Luyue stretched out her finger and lightly tapped on his chest. She leaned back slightly and her red lips curled up slightly. "There are people here. Your Highness, please restrain yourself." As she spoke, she turned around and looked at those people. Her eyes curved as she greeted them. "Gentlemen, what a coincidence. We meet again. Coincidence? Coincidence my ass." Seeing the smile on Chu Luyue's face, the suppressed anger in Nan Yuxing and the rest's hearts burned fiercely. This woman definitely did it on purpose. Relying on the fact that she had broken through to the great mystic king master level, she did not put others in her eyes. "You." Nan Yuxing was furious. "You don't know what's good for you." Chu Luyue blinked in surprise, as if she had not realized what had happened. "I wonder if this young master," Nan Yuxing, Rong Xiao reminded. There was no need to be polite with such people. Chu Luyue coughed. "I wonder where young Master Nanyu's words came from. Playing dumb." Nan Yuxing laughed in anger. "You really don't know? Don't tell me that you don't know what the man beside you did. Moreover, that little girl in the Scarlet Soul Forest was summoned by this woman. Come to think of it, these two people still owed them." Chu Luyue looked at Rong Xiao. She touched her chin with one hand, as if she was thinking about something. "My husband, hasn't he always been helping you?" Nan Yuxing and the rest could not believe that Chu Luyue could say such words. They were in an extremely sorry state and were covered in wounds. Wasn't it all caused by Rong Xiao? She actually had the nerve to lie through her teeth. Ha! Good. Good. I finally understand now. There's nothing to say to the two of you. A string in Nan Yuxing's mind suddenly snapped. With a flick of his sleeve, something quickly flew towards Chu Luyue. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from the Love Network. Chapter 1653. His attack was too sudden and his movements were extremely fast. By the time everyone reacted, that thing had already flown in front of Chu Luyue. Chu Luyue looked over. It was a completely white jade toad. The jade toad's carvings were extremely detailed. Under the white skin, one could even faintly see faint red bones and blood vessels. Those pair of dark eyes seemed to be filled with coldness, causing one to feel a chill in their hearts. At first glance, it was extremely lifelike, almost no different from the real thing. Chu Luyue's eyes turned cold. It seemed that Nan Yuxing really wanted her life. He had even taken out this thing. This jade toad was carved out of an extremely rare 1,000-year-old cold jade. Its entire body was filled with dense poisonous gas and was extremely lethal. If one wanted to unleash the full power of this jade toad, it would need to be placed in the body of a cultivator and nourished with their essence, blood and qi. The longer the time, the more powerful the jade toad would be. However, during this process, the cultivator would have to endure extreme pain. The longer the time, the more terrifying the torture would be. From the looks of this jade toad, Nan Yuxing must have spent a lot of effort on it. Now that he had taken out this item, it was obvious that he really wanted her life. Rong Xiao was about to attack when he suddenly raised his eyebrows and stopped. Chu Luyue narrowed her eyes and a cluster of golden flames suddenly appeared in her palm. The jade toad was about to fly over. At this moment, a black light blade suddenly appeared out of nowhere. Clang! The two collided with a crisp sound. Then, the jade toad instantly flew out and fell to the ground. A crack could be clearly seen on its back. Before Nan Yuxing's smile could fully spread, it suddenly froze. This jade toad was refined by him after a year of hard work. He usually treasured it and rarely used it. He did not expect it to be destroyed just like that. One must know that once a crack appeared on it, it could not be repaired. It was equivalent to a year's worth of hard work being wasted. He looked at Chu Luyue and Rong Xiao in shock and anger as blood rushed to his head. You, young Master Nanyu, you saw it clearly. It was not the two of us who attacked. Before he could say anything, Chu Luyue spoke first. Nan Yuxing was so angry that he felt dizzy. Not the two of you. Then who could it be? A ghost? However, Elder Wu Peng frowned. He saw clearly that Rong Xiao did not move. That black light blade indeed seemed to have appeared out of thin air. He looked at the black blade of light. After knocking the jade toad down, it quietly floated in the air. The dense black color seemed to want to swallow everything around it. An inexplicable sense of uneasiness arose in his heart. Young master, he took a step back of his voice. A low and hoarse voice suddenly came from the black blade of light. How can I allow others to covet the people I want to kill? Indifference, disdain, and sinister. It was filled with a strong killing intent. It was almost enough to make one shudder. As soon as the words were spoken, a terrifying aura descended upon the place. Nan Yuxing had not recovered from his serious injuries. Now that he was overwhelmed by anger, he could not bear the pressure and spat out a mouthful of blood. Big brother. Nan Yi hurriedly supported him, her face full of anxiety. What's wrong? Who is speaking? She looked in the direction of the voice. She was shocked and angry, but more than that, she was deeply afraid. Although she was usually spoiled and willful, she was still very talented in cultivation. Otherwise, she would not have been so doted on. She could clearly feel that the owner of that voice was terrifyingly strong. Who are you? The black light blade gradually transformed into a tall figure from the thick black fog. That person was wearing a long black robe. The hood hung down and covered his face, making it impossible to see clearly. A strong murderous aura spread from his body. Nan Yi's remaining words were suddenly stuck in her throat. She subconsciously covered her mouth and took a step back in fear. This person, is too dangerous. That man looked at Nan Yuxing. Were you the one who attacked just now? He asked slowly, but every word seemed to carry a bone-piercing chill. The pressure around Nan Yuxing increased again. He could not bear it and directly knelt on the ground. Bang! Elder Wu Peng immediately stood in front of him and said in a low voice. Sir, let's talk things over. His mind raced as he recalled everything that had happened just now. An absurd guess appeared in his heart. Sensing the dangerous aura from the other party, he swallowed with difficulty and his throat tightened. We have no intention of going against you. It's just that we have some grudges with these two people. Eldest young master was angry and attacked. But we really have no other intentions. The black-robed man looked at Chu Luyue and let out a strange laugh, but no one could detect any laughter. Shengguanyu, you are as good at causing trouble as always. I'm just a little late, and you've already provoked another enemy. It seems that there are really many people who want to kill you. Chu Luyue smiled. Thank you for the compliment. I actually don't like to cause trouble. Trouble often comes to me. They are like that. Aren't you the same? Hearing Chu Luyue's words, Elder Wu Peng and the others were secretly shocked. It seems that Shengguanyu really knows this mysterious black-robed man? And she seemed to have expected that he would appear. The black-robed man suddenly sneered. You are as bold as ever. Chu Luyue smiled and nodded. How can I be considered bold? You asked me to come here to die, so I'm here now. The two of them only spoke a few words, but there was an undercurrent surging. Nan Yuxing and the others were completely stunned at this moment. Judging from this, they seemed to have made an agreement to fight to the death here, right? Then, as if sensing their gazes, Chu Luyue looked back and curled the corners of her lips into a half-smile. I've already said that my husband helped you out of kindness, but you didn't appreciate it. Now, it's better for you to stay here with us. But whether you live or die depends on your own abilities. Elder Wu Peng had already realized the seriousness of the matter. Although he didn't know the identity of the other party, he knew that with the other party's strength, it would be easy for the other party to keep them here. They were here to look for something, not to die. Sir, today's matter is purely a misunderstanding. We have no intention of fighting with you. We'll leave now and make room for you. As Elder Wu Peng spoke, he took a step back and was about to leave with the others. Wait. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1654. Did I allow you to leave? The black-robed man spoke slowly. Every word was like a mountain that weighed heavily on the hearts of Nan Yuxing and the others. Elder Wu Peng turned around and cupped his fists. We really didn't mean to disturb you and have already apologized. May I know what else you're unhappy about? Was there something wrong with this person? Since he wanted to kill Shengguanyu, why didn't he just do it directly? What did it have to do with them? Even if Nan Yuxing attacked just now, he didn't hit him. Didn't he stop him? Wasn't that enough? Elder Wu Peng was a weapon refining supremacy and had a high status. When had he ever spoken so humbly to anyone? If Nan Yuxing and Elder Bai Tong weren't injured today and they still had important matters to attend to, he definitely wouldn't be so polite to this person. Pfft, the man sneered disdainfully as if he had heard a joke. You casually trespassed into my territory, acted presumptuously, and then left just like that. How can there be such a good thing in this world? Elder Wu Peng was shocked. You said this is your territory? Nan Yi couldn't help but say. Who doesn't know that countless experts are buried in the god-slaying ground? But now you say this is your territory. Do you really think we're that easy to fool? Although she was a little afraid of the black-robed man, she couldn't help but refute him. Of all things, why did he say this was his territory? This was the tombs of the god-slaying ground. The black-robed man suddenly raised his hand and clenched it. Ugh! Nanii suddenly felt as if her neck was being strangled by an invisible hand. Her entire body was lifted up. Because she couldn't breathe, her face quickly flushed red. No matter how hard she struggled, she couldn't break free. Second miss. Nan Yuxing and the others panicked when they saw this scene. They didn't expect the black-robed man to attack without saying anything. Elder Wu Peng wanted to fight back, but after thinking carefully, since the other party appeared here, whether this was his territory or not, it would definitely be beneficial to him. It wouldn't be good if he acted rashly. Sir, we're from the Nan family of the All Saints sect. Please think twice before you act. Do you really want to go against the All Saints sect? The black-robed man chuckled. So you are from the Nan family. No wonder you are so arrogant. It was a pity that he didn't seem to have a brain. Nan Yuxing couldn't help but take a step forward. You, Elder Bai Tong hurriedly pulled him back. Young master. The second miss was still in his hands. Nan Yuxing gritted his teeth and forced himself to endure. Elder Wu Peng didn't look any better. The humiliation and torment they had suffered today was more than what they had suffered in the past few years combined. Unfortunately, Nanii was in his hands now and they didn't dare to do anything. The strength of Nanii's struggle gradually weakened, leaving only blurred words that came out of her mouth. Didn't you want to kill her? Since this man's target was the Shangguanyu, why didn't he attack her directly instead of torturing her? However, she did not know that their actions just now had already angered the other party. Due to the lack of oxygen, her vision began to darken and her consciousness began to blur. Just when Nanii thought that she was really going to die here, the man in the black robe finally let go. Bam! Nanii's body was thrown heavily to the ground. The rough ground left many scratches on her body. The clothes on her back were torn, revealing streaks of bright red scars. Nanii was angry and embarrassed, but she didn't even have the strength to get up. Elder Wu Peng hurriedly went over, took out a coat and draped it over her, and helped her up. Seeing Nanii's miserable appearance, it was impossible for Nan Yuxing and the others to not be angry. But now, it was good enough that she was back. They didn't dare to ask for anything else. Killing you will dirty my hands. The man in the black robe said casually. Nanii's face was red and white, but she didn't dare to say another word. Her body was trembling violently. Chu Luyue crossed her arms and raised her eyebrows slightly. It was a pity that a good show had ended just like that. However, she didn't want to use this man to get rid of those people. This man was here for her, so he naturally wasn't interested in others. It was already a pleasant surprise to see them suffer. She exhaled softly, looked at the man in the black robe, and said with a faint smile. Let's get to the main topic quickly. If we continue to pester them like this, it won't be good to delay them from finding the treasure. Nan Yuxing and the others' expressions changed. Could it be that Shangguanyu already knew the purpose of their trip? But looking at her expression, it didn't seem like it. Treasure? The man in the black robe was stunned for a moment, then seemed to realize something and laughed ambiguously. Nan Yuxing and the others became even more nervous. However, just when they thought that the man in the black robe was going to make things difficult for them, they suddenly heard him say, "Why aren't you getting lost?" Elder Wu Peng made a prompt decision and hurriedly left with the three of them. They were more or less injured, but their speed was surprisingly fast. In a short while, their figures were already far away. It was as if they were afraid that the man in the black robe would regret it. "I'm here for the appointment. Where's my father?" The person in the way had already left, so Chu Luyue went straight to the point. The smile on her face faded a lot, and the aura around her became cold. The man in the black robe waved his sleeve. The void beside him trembled. Then, a black cage quietly appeared. A familiar figure was chained up by a chain and trapped within it. It was Chu Ning, whom she hadn't seen for a long time. At this moment, he was in a sorry state, thin and haggard. His clothes were tattered and stained with dirty blood. His hair was messy and scattered, almost covering half of his face. Chu Luyue could only see his unusually pale and cracked lips. However, with just one glance, she recognized that the person was Chu Ning. Father. Chu Luyue's heart was suddenly filled with endless sorrow. The man in the black robe suddenly laughed. Speaking of which, this Chu Ning was only fated with you for a short period of time. I didn't expect that you would really be willing to come to save him. Chu Luyue suppressed her emotions and laughed coldly. Didn't you already know when you attacked him? She was reborn into Chu Luyue's body and became father and daughter with Chu Ning. Although they didn't spend much time together, during that time, Chu Ning had always treated her as his own daughter. He gave his heart and soul to her, and even risked his life for her. In Chu Luyue's heart, she had long regarded him as her father. She was Shengguan Yu, and also Chu Luyue. Therefore, even if she knew that this trip was full of danger, she still came. You did everything you could to get me to come here. Now that I'm here, you should keep your promise and let my father go. Digression, the fifth watch was around 12:30 p.m. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1655. If you want me to let him go, it's very simple. The black-robed man stretched out his hand. Just give me that thing. Under the sleeve was a translucent palm. It could be seen that this time he appeared as a soul and did not possess another body. Chu Luyue narrowed her eyes slightly. This man's strength seemed to be much stronger than before. But, perhaps it was because the previous ones were just his doppelgangers. And the one in front of her was the real him. This time, he set the meeting place at the god-slaying tomb. Chu Luyue guessed that he should have some plans. Sure enough. This was probably the only place where he could unleash his full strength. Although they had not officially fought, from the situation just now, there was no doubt that he was almost at the level of a god. Chu Luyue thought and frowned slightly. Previously, she had secretly inquired about this person's identity. He used to be a member of the Black Demon Cave, and his status was not low, but later he was expelled from the sect. It was reasonable to say that such a person should be easy to find. However, Chu Luyue could not find any relevant information. The Black Demon Cave seemed to have sealed this information, and there was no news about it in the outside world. So until now, she was still not clear about the other party's identity. What, could it be that we haven't seen each other for so long that you have forgotten what I want? The black-robed man's tone seemed to be a little impatient. Chu Luyue looked up and curled the corners of her lips without a smile. Of course not. For that water droplet, this man had schemed against her countless times. How could she forget? She lifted her foot and walked forward. You, Rong Xiao suddenly spoke. Chu Luyue turned around. The two of them looked at each other. Be careful. Chu Luyue gently nodded, then turned and continued to walk forward. Rong Xiao stood in place, one hand behind his back, and his phoenix eyes slightly raised. The black-robed man seemed to have sensed something and laughed. Rong Xiao could indeed protect her. But here, even Rong Xiao was no match for him. Fortunately, Rong Xiao was a smart person and did not seem to have any intention of fighting. At this moment, Chu Luyue was only 10 steps away from the black-robed man. She stood still. Hand over the person, hand over the goods. The black-robed man did not hesitate. With a wave of his sleeve, the cage flew directly to Chu Luyue. As long as you give it to me obediently, this cage will automatically disperse. But if you try to play any tricks, trust me, he will only die faster. The black-robed man's voice was hoarse and gloomy. At this moment, there was a hint of threat in his voice, which made people feel even more uncomfortable. Chu Luyue ignored him and looked at Chu Ning in the cage. She was a little far away just now, and she was in a hurry, so she didn't get a good look. At this moment, the two of them were only one step apart. She could see every wound on Chu Ning's body clearly. He must have fainted. Both of them had been talking for so long, but he still hadn't woken up. His injuries should be very serious. Chu Luyue's heart seemed to be tightly gripped by something, and she found it difficult to breathe. After so long, she didn't know how much Daddy had suffered, and all of this was because of her. If it wasn't for her, he might still be in Yaochen, living a peaceful life. He wouldn't be wandering around and suffering like he was now. Chu Luyue's eyes were sour, and hot tears fell silently. Father, Chu Ning's brows suddenly moved. In his dizziness, he seemed to have heard a familiar voice. That's you, A strong desire to meet him burned wildly in the depths of his heart. Then, Chu Ning's eyelashes trembled, and he actually slowly opened his eyes. Chu Luyue had been looking at him the whole time, so of course, she noticed his movements immediately. For a moment, she was both surprised and happy. Father! You're awake. Chu Ning had been unconscious for too long. Now that he suddenly opened his eyes, he felt that the surrounding sunlight was incomparably dazzling, causing his eyes to hurt. However, he didn't dare to close his eyes. He only stared blankly at the person in front of him. His vision gradually cleared. The face that he had missed for countless days and nights finally appeared in front of him again. Her eyebrows were like distant mountains, and her black eyes were like stars. Chu Ning's heart beat quickly, and the blood in his body seemed to be boiling at this moment. You. His voice was very soft, and because he hadn't spoken for a long time, his voice was unbelievably hoarse. However, Chu Luyue still heard it clearly. She quickly wiped away her tears and outlined a bright smile. Father. It's me. The familiar voice entered his ears, knocking on his eardrums. Even his heart felt as if it had been hammered a few times by something. Chu Ning was stunned. The bright sunlight was so piercing that his tears flowed silently. This familiar eyebrows, this familiar voice, it's you, It's really her. The corners of Chu Ning's mouth moved, and he suddenly raised his hand as if he wanted to touch Chu Luyue's face. However, halfway through raising his arm, he suddenly fell weakly. His body was too weak, and he couldn't even complete such a simple action. Chu Ning smiled bitterly. It's all because father is useless. Unexpectedly. I can't even hug you, Even he himself didn't know how he had endured such a long time. He only thought that he couldn't leave you behind. Just like that, day after day, it seemed that the darkness would never end. But today, finally, Chu Luyue's tears fell again. However, the smile on her face was even more brilliant and bright. She said softly, Father, is here to take you home. Digression. An author who was beaten down by her period has no right to ask for more chapters. See you tomorrow. Woo. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1656. Clap. 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 The black-robed man clapped his hands and said with a faint smile, What a touching scene. Shengguan Liyue, as long as you give me that thing now, you can take him back immediately. Father and daughter are reunited. Isn't that so? Chu Ning suddenly came back to his senses when he heard the voice. He turned his head and looked at the black-robed man. His eyebrows suddenly knitted together. This man had taken him away from the wilderness and trapped him in this cage. It turned out that he wanted to threaten you, what does he want from you? Chu Ning grasped the bars of the cage tightly and asked worriedly. Although his body and mind were on the verge of collapse, he was still clear-headed when it came to you, This man was so powerful that it was beyond his imagination. What could a man like him not have? It could be imagined that the thing he wanted was definitely not ordinary since it could make him go through so much trouble. It was very likely that it was something extremely important to you, what exactly does he want? Chu Ning stared at Chu Luyue. I don't want you to make such a big sacrifice for me. Chu Luyue smiled comfortingly. Father, don't worry. Since I'm here, I've already made my decision. Nothing is more important to me than you. Chu Ning's heart ached and ached for her. He was smart. From Chu Luyue's answer, he was sure that what the black-robed man wanted to exchange with her was definitely a rare treasure. What was more, it was extremely important to her. Chu Ning shook his head and said slowly and firmly. No. I'm already an arrow at the end of its flight. The reason why I've been able to hold on until today is because I want to see you again. Now that I've seen you, I have no more regrets in my heart. He didn't know what kind of agreement you had with the black-robed man. But he was sure that you, must have made a concession. In the past. I've never been willing to let you suffer, and now, it's still the same. Chu Ning looked deeply at Chu Luyue, and his voice became weaker and weaker. It was just a matter of life and death. He didn't want you, to suffer even more pressure and pain because of him. Father, there's not much I can do for you, cough cough, the only thing I can do is to not drag you down, cough cough, Chu Luyue frowned slightly. Father, we are father and daughter. We are connected by blood. How could this be considered a burden? Saving you is what I should do. She didn't finish her sentence. Chu Ning looked at her with deep eyes and suddenly smiled. This glance, this smile, was already worth 1,000 words. He said, you've worked hard these past few years. Chu Luyue's heart seemed to have been hit by something. She pursed her lips. Actually, he should have thought of it earlier. Ever since she left Yaochen, returned to Tianling, and came to the Divine Ruins world, so many things had happened in such a long time. How could he not know anything? She could openly admit that she was from Shangguanyu in front of everyone. However, she still subconsciously returned to being Chu Luyue in front of Chu Ning. Is timid by nature. Why did her temperament suddenly change so much and become another person? Even if her appearance and figure are exactly the same, and her memory is exactly the same, but no one knows a daughter better than a father. Chu Ning gently closed his eyes. Of course, he already knew. Even if everything was correct, there were still some things that he could sense. Chu Luyue's hand slowly tightened. In fact, Chu Ning had suspected her identity a long time ago. She thought that she hid it well and that he believed her. But she didn't expect, ever since you became my daughter, I haven't been able to do anything for you. On the contrary, you have done so much. A trace of guilt appeared on Chu Ning's face. She was extremely outstanding. He was proud of her and also proud of her. Is gone, but the heavens have lowered the curtain and brought you here. If possible, I want you to be my daughter for the rest of your life. But I was too greedy in the end. At this point, he didn't want to drag her down. You have a great future ahead of you. Everything you have today is because of your hard work. There's no need to compromise again and again because of me. Chu Ning opened his eyes. His weary eyes were suffused with red. He wanted to live like this for the rest of his life, but, if there's a chance in the next life, father. Chu Luyue suddenly opened her mouth and interrupted him. Her voice was very soft, but her eyes were incomparably sincere. She looked at Chu Ning, almost looking into his heart. Father, you, is your daughter. She was in the past, now, and in the future. Therefore, she had to save this person today. As she spoke, she straightened up and looked at the black-robed man. Then she closed her eyes and held her breath in concentration. Just as Chu Ning reacted to her words, he saw her suddenly stretch out her hand. After a short moment of silence, a strange totem suddenly appeared in her palm. Then, the totem gradually floated up and condensed into a longan-sized water droplet at a speed visible to the naked eye. The water droplet was dazzling. The totem was engraved on its surface and could be seen clearly. From afar, it looked like a precious treasure that was meticulously carved out of colorful jade. The brilliance flowed and had a myriad of charm. Chu Ning's heart seemed to be tightly gripped by something. Although he didn't know what it was, he could feel that it was definitely not an ordinary item. Moreover, it seemed to be extremely important to you, When the water droplet appeared, her face seemed to have paled a little. As for the black-robed man, after seeing the water droplet, there was an obvious fluctuation in his aura. Chu Luyue stared ahead and then flicked her wrist. Since you want it. Take it. Swoosh. The black-robed man flicked his sleeve and snatched the water droplet in a hurry. A ball of thick black fog gushed out from his palm and quickly enveloped the water droplet. At a glance, the originally brilliant water droplet seemed to be covered with a layer of shadow and became much dimmer. The dense pressure and aura on it seemed to be suppressed in an instant. Soon, the water droplet fell into the black-robed man's palm. He looked greedily at the water droplet in his hand. Because of his excitement, even the surrounding space began to fluctuate. Finally, in order to find this item, he had spent a lot of time and suffered a lot of torture. Now, this item had finally fallen into his hands. Chu Luyue said coldly. Now, can you let go of my father? The black-robed man reluctantly moved his gaze away from the water droplet and looked up at Chu Luyue. You're quite obedient. He originally thought that she would play some tricks, but now it seemed that he had worried too much. Just for Chu Ning, she would give up such a precious treasure. Only she would do such a stupid thing. He laughed complacently and gloomily. Sure. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1657. As he spoke, he waved his other hand gently. The black cage instantly transformed into countless black light spots and scattered in all directions. Chu Ning's body was freed from the cage and suddenly loosened. His body fell to the side uncontrollably. Right at this moment, a gentle force flew over and gently supported his body. Then, Chu Ning felt that his whole body was surrounded by this force, which then sent him to the side. He subconsciously wanted to break free, but from the corner of his eye, he happened to see Rong Xiao standing at the side. In an instant, he suddenly understood, this should be Rong Xiao's move. Sure enough, with the help of this force, his body quickly reached Rong Xiao's side. Lord Chu Ning. Rong Xiao stretched out his hand and helped him up. Chu Ning looked at this familiar face. Your Highness Princely. No, Your Highness's current identity should be, the Holy Sun. He didn't know much about Rong Xiao, but he had heard some things. Rong Xiao's lips curved slightly. You, and I are already engaged. You can just call me Rong Xiao. Hearing the two words, you, Chu Ning immediately reacted and immediately grabbed Rong Xiao's wrist tightly. Yes. You, Quickly help you, If that thing was really taken away by the black-robed man, then, chi. Suddenly, a sharp sound broke through the air. Chu Ning was shocked and hurriedly looked back. When he saw the scene in front of him clearly, a trace of shock and worry flashed across his eyes. This was because the countless black light spots that previously transformed into numerous black light pillars once again rushed toward Chu Liyue's surroundings. In the blink of an eye, it formed an incomparably strong cage, which completely locked Chu Liyue. Chu Ning was shocked and angry at the same time, looking at the black-robed man angrily. You, despicable! The black-robed man laughed in a low voice. You are the owner of this thing. How can I not take you away? He wanted to make this thing completely his. Therefore, he had to deal with Shengguan Yu as well. Chu Liyue stared fixedly at him, her red lips suddenly forming a cold arc. So you're saying that you've decided not to let me go? This thing has already recognized you as its master. Even if I take it away, it won't listen to me. So what? The black-robed man raised his hand and clenched his fist. The black pillar of light surrounding Chu Liyue instantly emitted an astonishing pressure. The surrounding space began to shrink crazily, squeezing toward her. Chu Liyue felt a tightness in his chest and blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth. Unfortunately, I only know of one way to solve this problem. That is, to kill you. Of course, if you know of other ways, it's not a bad idea to share them. Maybe I can spare your life? The black-robed man's tone was high and mighty, as if he could decide Chu Liyue's life and death with just a thought. The qi and blood in Chu Ning's body churned, and he was about to charge forward without a care. Rong Xiao grabbed his arm. Lord Chu Ning, you're in danger. Chu Ning turned around anxiously and was about to say something, but he met Rong Xiao's calm eyes. He was suddenly stunned. He knew how Rong Xiao treated you, However, he didn't seem to be worried at all. Could it be that he still had a trump card? Or did you have other plans? Rong Xiao's thin lips curved slightly. You will definitely return safely. Don't worry. As his voice fell, the black-robed man laughed mockingly. Ha ha ha. What a joke. Shengguan Yu, this thing is equivalent to your core of essence. Now that it's separated from you, you're equivalent to a piece of trash with no combat ability. What else do you have to fight me with? These people were too naive. But after hearing his words, Chu Liyue's face did not show any signs of panic. Instead, she even smiled. She raised her hand and slowly wiped the blood from the corner of her mouth. Her eyes were filled with killing intent. She said, You're right. This core of essence is extremely important to any cultivator. Unfortunately, you forgot one thing. Swoosh. A beam of snow-white light flashed in an instant. The red cloud sword appeared in her hand. The blade was sharp, and the cold light was biting cold. Now, its owner is still me. Boom! A vast and majestic force suddenly gushed out from the water droplet. The layer of black fog surrounding the water droplet was completely washed away in an instant. The boundless pressure instantly collapsed like a dam, and a torrential flood surged down majestically. The black-robed man sensed that something was wrong. His heart sank and he raised his hand to seal it again. However, just as he moved, the force surged toward him. His body was instantly flung away. How is this possible? When he finally regained control of his body, he immediately looked up at the water droplet with a face full of disbelief. This thing was incomplete. How could it have such shocking power? How is it impossible? Chu Liyue sneered. This thing had been with her for many years, devouring her force day and night. After accumulating for a long time, it had already reached a terrifying level. Even if this black-robed man's strength had reached the level of a god, it would be extremely difficult to control it. She had gone through life and death to finally subdue this thing. Now, someone had suddenly appeared and wanted to snatch it away without a word. How could she agree? Chu Liyue slowly tightened her grip on the red cloud sword, and the force around her began to surge violently. She said, Word by word, I hate it when people snatch my things. Swoosh. The water droplet quickly flew back and rushed into Chu Liuyue's body. Chu Liuyue's aura surged. The next moment, she tapped the ground with the tip of her foot and leaped out. She raised the red cloud sword high. The energy of heaven and earth trembled violently and crazily gathered. Red cloud sword. The cold rainbow light tore through the air and instantly slashed toward the black-robed man. Her series of actions were too fast, and the black-robed man couldn't react in time. In a hurry, he could only raise his hand to block it. Clang! The red cloud sword landed on his sleeve, and it was as if it had cut black iron, producing an extremely crisp sound of collision. Swoosh! The red cloud sword ruthlessly scratched the sleeve, leaving a pale white mark. At the same time, the man borrowed the force and quickly retreated. He looked down at his sleeves and suddenly smiled sinisterly. Your red cloud sword is indeed powerful. Last time, my clone suffered a loss because of this. But, do you think I will let you win a second time? Chu Liuyue's eyes narrowed dangerously. No wonder this man wanted her to come here. Although he didn't have a physical body, this black robe was not ordinary. There weren't many things that could withstand the red cloud sword, but it only left a mark on this black robe. Since you want to fight with me, then don't blame me for being impolite. The black-robed man crossed his hands in front of him. Boom! In an instant, heaven and earth changed color. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1658. Chu Liyue looked up. Dark clouds were quickly gathering in the sky. Rumbling sounds came from the thick layers of clouds with great momentum. Chu Liyue's eyes flashed with a hint of sternness. This man did not pause at all. The moment he attacked, he caused the sky to change color and the force to tremble. This showed how powerful he was. You do have some ability to make it recognize you as its master. However, a mere exalted god wants to fight me head-on. I don't know if I should call you naive or stupid. The black-robed man's voice was filled with shocking anger. A cloud of black mist quickly condensed in his palm. The surrounding force of heaven and earth also began to surge crazily. In just a moment, the cloud of black mist condensed into a black palm. This palm was the same size and shape as his hand, but it was condensed by black mist and there seemed to be dark red veins on the surface. It looked very terrifying. Chu Liyue's pupils shrank. This hand. From the looks of it, it was extremely similar to the hand that was suppressed under the myriad wine mountain. It was just that the one in front of him was much smaller than that, and the aura of suppression was also different. Could it be, were they from the same sect and origin? Or were they cultivating the same type of cultivation technique? Many guesses flashed through Chu Liyue's mind. Silent scorching palm. The black-robed man shouted in a low voice. The palm began to fly toward Chu Liyue. Its speed was not fast, but wherever it passed, the surrounding space would silently collapse. Most importantly, as it approached Chu Liyue, it was still constantly devouring the surrounding energy. The suppression on it became more and more powerful. At the same time, the man waved his sleeves, and countless black light spots fell from the sky. Chu Liyue immediately felt a weight on his body, as if something heavy was pressing down on him. Every movement of his seemed to become difficult and slow. God domain. The god domain of a venerable god was indeed incomparable to an exalted god. Chu Liyue just stood there and felt as if his body was about to explode. She wanted to wave Scarlet Heaven Sword, but found that she could not even do a simple action like raising the sword in the opponent's god domain. A venerable god artifact is indeed a good treasure. Unfortunately, your realm is too far away from mine. In the face of absolute power, any auxiliary power would become meaningless. Chu Liyue was trapped in the same place, and the black palm was getting closer and closer. Blood flowed from the corner of her mouth again. Every part of her body seemed to have been ruthlessly crushed by something. The intense pain caused her face quickly turned pale, and her body, as if she would collapse at any moment. Her hands that were holding the sword began to tremble. Chu Ning, who was standing in the distance, saw this scene and his heart almost stopped beating. If it weren't for Rong Xiao taking care of him, he would have died by now. Chu Ning suddenly thought of something and looked at Rong Xiao. At this time, Rong Xiao, was he still not going to make a move? Rong Xiao was also watching the battle with a focused expression. However, there was no shock or anxiety in his eyes. It was as if he was waiting for something. That black palm was already right in front of Chu Luyue and was about to land on her body. At this moment, Scarlet Heaven sword in her hand finally moved. Endless elemental power gushed out from the water droplet and spread to her limbs and bones. Chu Luyue's aura rose again. She swung her sword. Swish! The sharp and bright blade slashed down from the middle of the black palm. One hand was instantly cut into two halves. However, seeing this scene, Chu Luyue suddenly felt uneasy. Sure enough, in the next moment, the two halves of the palm actually condensed once more, and they formed two identical hands. The most terrifying thing was that the power and aura on it did not seem to be reduced at all. Chu Luyue's heart sank. Then, the two hands flanked Chu Luyue from the left and right. The feeling of being restrained returned once again. This silent burning palm can devour all the attacking power. Unless you are also a venerable god expert and can break it, otherwise, as long as you continue to attack, it will only continue to become stronger. The black-robed man laughed sinisterly. In this case, do you still want to continue? The more she resisted, the worse the result. Chu Luyue stared at the two palms in front of her as countless thoughts flashed through her mind. She did not doubt the truth of the other party's words. His realm and strength were indeed much higher than hers. As a venerable god, forcefully fighting against a venerable god expert was like a mantis trying to stop a chariot. It seemed that she had to think of another way. Chu Luyue's mind raced, and then she directly stabbed Scarlet Heaven's sword into the ground. Since she couldn't beat him, wouldn't it be fine if she didn't fight? Her sudden action stunned the black-robed man for a moment. Was she going to admit defeat? It didn't seem to be. Clang. Chu Luyue took out a black shield and placed it in front of her. The black shield looked very shabby and unremarkable. However, the moment he saw the black shield, the black-robed man's hands in his sleeves instantly tightened. Chu Luyue did not notice this. After placing the shield in front of her, she simply sat down cross-legged. She took a deep look at the black-robed man opposite her, and then slowly closed her eyes. She raised her hand slightly, and several streams of light instantly appeared. Xian formation? At this moment, the black-robed man finally realized what Chu Luyue was trying to do. The strength of a martial artist could not fight against him, so she wanted to use a Xian formation. Qi. After understanding Chu Luyue's plan, the black-robed man's first reaction was to laugh. Did she think that she had the confidence to turn the tables? A Xian master could indeed display power that exceeded his own strength, but there was a limit to it. Moreover, if she wanted to display such a level, she would have to construct an extremely complicated Xian formation. At this moment, Chu Luyue did not have the time. What? Just as this thought flashed through his mind, he saw that a palm-sized Xian formation had already appeared in front of Chu Luyue. Although the Xian formation was small, the pressure on it was not to be underestimated. Once it was used, its power would definitely be extraordinary. A trace of shock flashed through the black-robed man's heart. How could she be so fast? Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1659. At this moment, his two black palms had already closed in on Chu Luyue and were about to succeed. However, when they were a step away from Chu Luyue, they suddenly stopped and were unable to take another step forward. It was as if there was something terrifying in front of them that made them fearful. The black shield stood silently in front of Chu Luyue. At a glance, there was nothing special about it. However, the two black palms finally stopped and refused to move forward. The black-robed man seemed to have expected this as he gritted his teeth and said, "I actually forgot that you still have this trump card." His voice was cold and resentful. Chu Luyue closed her eyes and was still constructing the Xian formation in front of her as if she didn't hear it. Or maybe she heard it, but she didn't care. Since the battle at Myriad Wine Mountain, she knew that compared to Crimson Heaven Sword, this black shield was the true trump card of her trump cards. When she faced such a terrifying attack at that time, she relied on this black shield to survive, let alone now. This black-robed man was strong, but he wasn't so strong that he was invincible. Even if she couldn't defeat him, it wasn't that difficult for her to survive. Under the protection of the black shield, this battle that didn't have any suspense came to a halt. The scene seemed to be frozen, allowing time to flow slowly. Only the Xian formation in front of Chu Luyue was expanding and becoming more and more complicated. "Let's see how long you can hide." She could temporarily hide behind the black shield and buy some time for herself. However, she couldn't be like this forever. As for the Xian formation, he didn't think that Chu Luyue had the ability to do so. Both parties were in a stalemate. Chu Ning's gaze swept across the few of them as he frowned. He roughly saw the current situation, but he still felt that there were many things that were very strange. Why did the black-robed man want to snatch Yu's pill of origin? Yu wanted to use the Xian formation to fight with the opponent, but he didn't know if it would work. Furthermore, the black-robed man didn't even look at them from the beginning to the end. He didn't make a move against Rongxiu, and Rongxiu also watched from the side and didn't make a move. What exactly was going on with them? Unable to figure it out, Chu Ning gave up. He clenched his fists and prayed in his heart. You must come back safe and sound." Nan Yuxing and the others finally slowed down after making sure that no one was chasing after them. There were 4 of them in total. Nan Yuxing and Elder Baitong were heavily injured, while Nan Yi was lightly injured. Only Elder Wu Peng's situation was slightly better. However, losing a King Divine artifact that he had personally refined was not a small blow to him. The few of them found a place to rest, and only then did they carefully treat their injuries. Nan Yuxing was still fine. They hadn't fought head-on. His anger had attacked his heart, causing his internal injuries to worsen. However, it was still within a manageable range. Elder Baitong's situation was the worst. A section of his calf was cut off. Even though he was a celestial physician, the only thing he could do now was to stop the bleeding and heal his wounds. That section of his calf had been completely crushed, and he didn't even have the chance to sew it back together. This would have a huge impact on any cultivator. They were all silent, and the atmosphere was cold and stifling. After a long while, Nanny finally couldn't help but ask. "That man, who is he? When did such a person appear in the god-slaying mound?" His strength was unbelievably strong, and he even said that it was his territory. At first, they thought that he was just saying it casually. However, what happened later made them suspicious. He doesn't look like he's from the outside world. However, in the battle tens of thousands of years ago, all the god-level experts were killed and their souls destroyed. Moreover, the energy here is violent. Ordinary people can't stay here for more than a year. Otherwise, it's very easy for them to die because they can't withstand the violent energy here. Nan Yuxing frowned and muttered to himself. Elder Wu Peng suddenly said. "He's not a normal person. He's just a soul. That's why he's so strong. Isn't that even more suspicious?" Nan Yuxing rubbed his forehead. Ordinary cultivators without a physical body would have their strength greatly reduced. However, that wasn't the case for that black-robed man. There's also that Wuxia. I've heard some rumors about him before, but I didn't pay much attention to him. Now that I've seen him today, I know that his strength has reached such a level. At the mention of this, Nan Yuxing couldn't help but clench his teeth. Resentment, jealousy, unwillingness, he had always prided himself on being outstanding, but today, he was dim in front of that man. How could he feel good? Elder Wu Peng said in a deep voice. This Wuxia is hiding his strength. When we go back, we must investigate him carefully. Also, Patriarch. Wuxia recognized them immediately. It was obvious that he knew them well. He even called out Nan Yifan's name in such a casual tone. This was another hidden concern in Elder Wu Peng's heart. They were all silent for a moment. If Wuxia wasn't bluffing, then, look. Something seems wrong over there. Nan Yi looked back and suddenly exclaimed. They all looked over. The sky in the distance had unknowingly become gloomy. There seemed to be lightning flashing vaguely. They're fighting? Nan Yuxing suddenly realized something and sneered. No matter how powerful they are, they're definitely not that man's match. This time. I'm afraid they're all going to die in that man's hands. Wind, clouds, and thunder. The energy of heaven and earth kept surging. Chu Liuyue's hair was lifted by the wind. The oppressive feeling around her seemed to have become stronger. Chu Liyue frowned slightly. Although the black shield could help her block most of the attacks, it couldn't completely isolate all the power. The black-robed man's god domain was indeed too terrifying. If this continued, she was afraid that before she could cast the Xian formation, she would clatter. A stone suddenly fell out of Chu Liuyue's universe ring. The black-robed man was stunned when he saw this scene. Why did a stone suddenly appear? Clatter. Immediately after, the second stone fell. Then, more and more stones appeared. Digression, I'm going out to do something today, so I might be late when I get home, so I won't let everyone wait. I'll update it tomorrow. Chapter 1660. Soon, the ground around Chu Liyue was littered with stones. It was messy and did not seem to follow any rules. The black-robed man was even more confused. Why did so many stones suddenly appear out of nowhere? Could it be that Shengguanyu needs the power of these stones to set up a Xian formation? But these ugly stones are ordinary. What's so good about them? However, for some reason, they look familiar. Splash, the faint sound of waves was suddenly heard. The sound was very soft. If one did not listen carefully, they would not be able to hear it clearly. However, the surroundings were very quiet at this moment, and the black-robed man's attention was focused on Chu Liyue, so he happened to hear this sound. Just as he was puzzled, a blue stream of light suddenly surged out from one of the stones. The originally powerful pressure that was almost suffocating seemed to have been torn open by this blue stream of light. The black-robed man finally realized something. This is a god domain. There was a hint of disbelief in his voice. It was not only because of the god domain that suddenly flowed out of the stones, but also because he finally remembered why these stones looked so familiar. Aren't these the broken tombstones from the tomb of the exalted gods? Why did these things suddenly appear in Shengguanyu? The black-robed man had a bad feeling. He vaguely felt that he seemed to have overlooked something important. While he was in shock and hesitating, more and more god domains surged out from the stones. These god domains were scattered, and almost every one of them was very small and weak. However, many little drops made an ocean. At this point, there were at least hundreds of stones scattered around Chu Liyue. Together, there were hundreds of god domains. Most importantly, these god domains seemed to have some kind of tacit understanding with each other. With Chu Liyue as the center, they surrounded her and surged silently, tearing holes in the invisible pressure. Silently, Chu Luyue was already completely surrounded and protected by these god territories. The pressure around her suddenly decreased, causing Chu Luyue to open her eyes in shock. When she saw the rocks and the divine territory around her, she was shocked. This was because she had been thinking about how to complete the Xian formation as soon as possible to defend against the black-robed man's attack. He didn't expect that these stones would come out of the interspatial ring by themselves. And, he's even taking the initiative to protect me? Chu Luyue blinked and thought for a moment. She didn't even have time to summon her divine realm before, then, she lifted her gaze and looked at the black-robed man again. Even though she couldn't see his face, she could keenly sense that his aura had become even more ferocious and dangerous. Seeing this scene, his mood probably wouldn't be too good. Thinking of this, Chu Luyue's lips curved up. With this huge help, her chances of winning were even higher. You actually took all of these for yourself? The black-robed man suddenly raised his hand and pointed at Chu Luyue. Shengguan Yu, how dare you? Because of his agitation, his voice became a little sharp, but he quickly suppressed it, as if he was worried about something. Chu Luyue raised her eyebrows slightly. Thank you for the compliment. You've known me for a long time. Do you only know who I am now? Actually, she didn't take these stones on her own accord, but they insisted on following her. She had no choice but to keep them in her interspatial ring. She didn't care much at first, but now, these stones seemed to be quite useful. The black-robed man was so angry that his hand that was pointing at Chu Luyue trembled slightly. You. However, after holding it in for a long time, he couldn't think of any rebuttal. Of course, he knew what these stones were, and that was why he was so shocked. Weren't they living well in my place? They had been living like this for tens of thousands of years. No matter how the weather changed, they remained indifferent and only maintained the same state. Why did they suddenly change when they met Shengguan Yu? He couldn't figure it out. At the same time, he felt a little worried for the first time. Such a shocking change was definitely not a small matter. Moreover, with their help, it wouldn't be that easy to kill Shengguan Yu again. He began to try to increase the pressure of his deity domain in an attempt to attack Chu Luyue again. However, hundreds of deity domains had already formed an extremely strong protective net around Chu Luyue. If he wanted to deal with Chu Luyue again, he would have to think of other ways. The black-robed man fell into a long silence as he looked at the countless deity domains floating in the air. Are those deity domains? Chu Ning frowned slightly and asked softly. Rong Xiao nodded slightly. We accidentally bumped into these yesterday. They seem to be fated with you, You couldn't resist and brought them along. I didn't expect them to be so useful at such a crucial time. Chu Ning didn't say anything. Rong Xiao looked around and saw that Chu Ning was still staring at the deity domains. He thought that Chu Ning was still worried about Chu Luyue, so he said, Don't worry. Don't worry. Although the individual might of these god territories isn't extremely strong, when gathered together, they can still unleash a great effect. Moreover, Yu has her own deity domain, so she has her own deity domain? Yes. You just happened to break through to the high god realm some time ago. Due to the special circumstances, Rong Xiao didn't explain in detail. Yu's deity domain didn't appear during this breakthrough. She already had it a few years ago. It was just that she suppressed her deity domain in Mount Pengmin during this period of time. So this is a deity domain. Chu Ning seemed to have understood something, and a look of realization appeared on his face. He lowered his eyes and looked at his hands. They were blood-stained and full of injuries. However, his eyes seemed to be looking at something else through his hands. Rong Xiao felt that something was strange when he noticed Chu Ning's silence. Lord Chu Ning, what's wrong? Chu Ning retracted his gaze and shook his head. Nothing. I just feel that Yu has changed a lot after we parted. what was her cultivation level when we parted last time? Now, she had grown to her current level. Rong Xiao was about to speak when he heard Chu Ning's voice suddenly lower. She must have suffered a lot, right? He asked carefully, but there was an unconcealable sadness and heartache in his voice. Rong Xiao's words were suddenly stuck in his throat. He looked at Chu Ning with a slightly deep gaze. Everyone could see that she was shining brightly. Only those who truly loved her could see her hardships and difficulties. After a long while, Rong Xiao slowly tightened his hands in his sleeves and said, "Don't worry. I'm here. I'll make sure that she's safe and happy." Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1661. The Xian formation in front of Chu Luiyue was gradually being completed. A terrifying aura was being emitted from the formation. At the same time, dark clouds were gathering in the sky, and the wind and thunder were howling. The uneasiness in the black-robed man's heart grew stronger. When he made his move just now, he had caused a phenomenon in heaven and earth. However, when Chu Luiyue's Xian formation was completed, he was shocked to realize that her ability to summon the energy of heaven and earth seemed to be slightly better than his. This made his already anxious heart feel even more uncomfortable. I can't let this go on. He had spent a lot of effort to lure Shengguanyu here. If he couldn't take her down today, it would be difficult for him to find such an opportunity in the future. Furthermore, this woman's strength had always been increasing at an unimaginable rate. In the beginning, he didn't take her seriously at all. However, as the days passed, she was now able to make him feel threatened. If he delayed any longer, perhaps one day, Shengguanyu would surpass him. Who knows? When that time came, wouldn't all his years of planning go to waste? When he thought of this, he finally made up his mind and raised his hand. He didn't have a physical body. Instead, he was a translucent soul in his black robe. At this moment, he stretched out his hands and a black fog appeared. The strange black fog lingered around his hands and then quietly dissipated. However, when his hands reappeared, they were different from before. They were thinner and even looked like skeletons. They carried an unconcealable evil aura. Swoosh! A dark light flashed past his palms. Suddenly, a black wooden stick appeared. The wooden stick was about the thickness of an adult's arm. It was dark in color and its surface was rough with many scratches. However, the top of the wooden stick was very round and seemed to be engraved with red veins. However, the color was extremely dim and didn't stand out when compared to the black color. If one didn't look carefully, they wouldn't notice it. However, the black wooden stick had a very good texture and seemed to be quite heavy. The black-robed man slowly clenched his fists. The energy of heaven and earth in the surroundings suddenly surged towards him. Then, all of it poured into the wooden stick. In an instant, smoke and dust filled the air. Noticing the commotion, Chu Luiyue quickly looked up to take a look. Her gaze lingered on the black wooden stick for a moment. With just one glance, her heart suddenly trembled. This thing, I'm afraid, is not simple. She held her breath and concentrated, speeding up the drawing of the profound formation in front of her. A strange blood-red rune suddenly appeared on the black wooden stick. The appearance of this rune seemed to have opened a layer of restriction, causing the black wooden stick's aura to rise once more. The first layer of the brilliant heaven staff, Wave Breaker. He gripped the black wooden stick tightly with both hands, raised it high, and then slammed it down hard. Boom! The black wooden stick landed heavily on the ground, exploding with an earth-shattering boom. Crack! A gully instantly appeared on the ground. A tyrannical and violent power swept out. The ravine also began to extend towards Chu Luiyue at an astonishing speed. Everywhere it passed, space was unable to endure this sudden and terrifying force, and it collapsed soundlessly. In the blink of an eye, he was already in front of Chu Luiyue. Crash! The energy of heaven and earth around Chu Luiyue was greatly affected by this attack, and it began to spread wildly to the side. The countless divine domains around her were also gradually surging up and down like waves. The black-robed man stared at the scene in front of him. The brilliant sky staff was his trump card, and it was extremely powerful. However, every time he used it, he would expend a lot of energy, and it would take him at least 3 months to recover. Therefore, he rarely used it. Originally, he did not want to use it today. After all, it was not difficult for him to deal with Sheng Guanyu. However, he did not expect her to have so many trump cards. Furthermore, she had even taken those stones that contained divine domains for her own use. Helpless, he could only do this. As long as he could end the battle quickly, everything else could be temporarily put aside. The brilliant sky staff had a total of 3 layers of power. Each layer was stronger than the previous one, but the impact on him was also greater. However, even the first layer was enough to deal with her. Crash! The sound of the surging waves became clearer and clearer in his ears. Chu Luiyue could even see that the divine domains around her were also greatly affected, and they were on the verge of collapse. It was as if they would be destroyed by that terrifying power at any time. The surrounding environment was unstable, and she could not continue to focus on the Xian formation. But, she was so close. Chu Luiyue frowned slightly. Then, she suddenly thought of something and had a thought. Whoosh! Countless stones rolled out from the universe ring, and in a short while, they covered her body. Several divine realms rushed out of these stones and merged with the previous ones. Very soon, the divine realm that was still on the verge of collapse became stable again. As for that energy, it was finally completely blocked outside and was unable to move forward in the slightest. How is this possible? The black-robed man was shocked by the scene in front of him. Just now, he had made up his mind to finish off Sheng Guanyu, and he did not hold back at all. How is she so strong? No, that's not right. To be more precise, she had too many stones on her. Did she empty the tombs of the exalted gods? Chu Luiyue's lips curled into a smile. Looks like this move of yours is only a so-so. Wave breaking, if it was a huge wave, it would not be so easy for him to break it. Boom! The two forces collided fiercely, but Chu Luiyue's divine domain did not fluctuate at all. On the contrary, the black-robed man's strike was quickly collapsing. Looking at the scene before him, the black-robed man was first shocked, then he trembled with anger. She actually withstood that strike. She did not even make a move from the beginning to the end. She only threw some stones. Are you crazy? In a moment of desperation, the black-robed man could no longer hold back and shouted at the stones. How dare you help her like this? Have you all forgotten who you are? This shout was obviously directed at the rocks. Although the scene looked very strange, Chu Luiyue, who had dealt with these stones before, knew that they could understand human language. However, no matter how angry he was, no matter how loud he screamed, the rocks remained indifferent. There was no reaction at all. The black-robed man was furious. Are you all trying to rebel? No matter what, these stones came from the tombs of the exalted gods. However, this was the tombs of the exalted gods. And he was indeed an exalted god powerhouse. Chu Luiyue's lips curled up slightly. Looks like they don't want to bother with you. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1662. I can't let this go on, the black-robed man thought to himself. He had already sensed that the Xian formation in Sheng Guanyu was not simple. With the help of these stones, I'm afraid, he no longer hesitated and made a prompt decision. He held the brilliant sky staff tightly. The energy in the surroundings surged again. This time, the commotion was obviously bigger than the previous one. Then, a second strange rune appeared on the black wooden staff. The blood-red totem at the top of the wooden staff also became clearer. Second stage of the brilliant sky staff, mountain seal. The black-robed man's sleeves fluttered, and the aura around him surged wildly. The second strike landed fiercely. Boom! A ray of black light suddenly flew out from the wooden staff and rapidly transformed into numerous black vines that were as thick as a thumb. These vines intertwined with each other, and in the blink of an eye, they formed a huge dome that trapped Chu Luyue within. Chu Luyue's surrounding god domain was once again shaken by this force and started shaking. She felt a tightness in her chest, and a strong smell of blood spread from her mouth. She forced herself to swallow it and continued to draw the last few strokes on the Xian formation. The god territory's energy fluctuated more violently, and it seemed to be on the verge of collapse. The black-robed man sneered. With the help of these god territories, Shangguanyu was indeed difficult to deal with. However, whether it was her or these god territories, they were only high gods. If they wanted to defeat him, it was still too early. Die! The black-robed man shouted. Countless vines instantly tightened. Some of the god territories around Chu Luyue were unable to withstand the erosion of this force and began to shatter. However, at this moment, a reddish-gold ray of light suddenly flashed. Then, a little girl who looked no older than 3 or 4 years old appeared in front of Chu Luyue. She was wearing a reddish-gold lotus leaf dress, and her hair was tied up in 2 buns with a red string and a golden bell. She looked very cute. Especially her pair of black grape-like eyes, which were clear and pure. However, at this moment, his eyes were burning with raging flames of fury. She pointed at the black-robed man, and her face was filled with anger. You want to bully you? You're courting death. The sudden appearance of Dumpling caused the atmosphere to become strange. The black-robed man looked at the little girl who suddenly appeared and almost laughed out loud. What's the matter? Shangguanyu, you can't beat him, so you even called out your children to fight? Isn't that a little too? Suddenly, his laughter stopped. No. The space around Chu Luyue had already been sealed by his brilliant sky rod. The people outside could not enter, and the people inside could not come out. How did this little girl suddenly appear there? Furthermore, when she appeared, there didn't seem to be any energy fluctuations around her. How could such a child do all this? He stared at Dumpling and was suddenly startled. Wait a minute. When she appeared, there seemed to be a flash of golden light. Could it be Crimson Gold Heavenly Phoenix? He almost couldn't believe his eyes as he shouted out these words. He knew that Shangguanyu had a contracted divine beast called the Crimson Gold Heavenly Phoenix. When he suddenly saw this little girl, he didn't think of that. However, everything in front of him kept proving his guess. Before he could react, Dumpling had already moved and went directly to the surrounding intertwined black vines. Chi! With a wave of her small hand, the golden flame flew out instantly. It landed on the black vines and began to burn violently. The black-robed man's heart sank. It was indeed the Crimson Gold Heavenly Phoenix. However, if the Crimson Gold Heavenly Phoenix wanted to transform into a human, it should at least look like a teenager. However, this little girl looked to be only 3 or 4 years old. How did she do it? Moreover, why hadn't he heard of this before? Countless questions flashed through his mind, but he didn't have much time now. Because under the burning of the reddish gold flames, the layer of black vines was gradually burned to nothing. Moreover, the fire seemed to be spreading. How is this possible? The black-robed man was shocked when he saw this scene. The brilliant sky rod was his trump card and was extremely powerful. Ordinary flames couldn't do anything to it. Even the flames of the Crimson Gold Heavenly Phoenix could barely resist it. How could there be such a one-sided situation? However, he didn't know that Dumpling's flames were different from ordinary Crimson Gold Heavenly Phoenixes. She had the purest bloodline and inherited the power of the ancestor of the clan. Back then, that ancestor was born in the chaos and was a supreme existence in the world. How could it be a problem to deal with him? While he was in a daze, Dumpling had already dashed to the front of those black vines. Her little face was filled with anger. She actually reached out her chubby little hand and grabbed at the black vines. Arrogant. When the black-robed man saw this, he was so angry that he laughed mockingly. This crimson-gold heavenly phoenix was indeed quite capable, but unfortunately, she was too impulsive and brainless. The black vines were covered with sharp thorns. Even if a high god powerhouse tried to grab it forcefully, he would only end up being stabbed. Needless to say, there was poison on it. What? His smug smile froze on his face before it could fully spread out. Chi! Tuanzi directly grabbed the rattan in front of her and pulled it hard. The huge vines were pulled down by her just like that. This time, even the entire cage made of black rattan vines began to tremble, on the verge of collapsing. At the same time, the flames in Dumpling's palms surged and burned the cage to ashes. She didn't even give the black-robed man any time to react. By the time he realized what was happening, the entire semicircular cage made of black vines had been destroyed by Dumpling. On the other hand, there wasn't even a scratch on Dumpling's chubby little hand. Chi! Dumpling kept pulling, venting all her anger on the black vines. The originally sturdy cage was torn apart by her just like that. Ignoring the gazes of others, Dumpling gritted her teeth and quickly pulled the black vines together. Then, she waved a ball of fire. Boom! The fire soared into the sky and burned completely. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1663. There was dead silence. The crackling sound of the burning vines was exceptionally clear. The black-robed man took a step back weakly. He held the brilliant sky rod in one hand and placed his other hand on his chest. He bent down slightly, as if he was experiencing some kind of pain. He had used almost all of his strength to execute this attack. Now that they were burned by Tuanzi in such a way, the countercharge he suffered was extremely shocking. How could he bear it? After this incident, he would definitely not be able to recover without half a year of recuperation. Good. Good. He gritted his teeth and his voice seemed to be squeezed out from the gaps of his teeth. He did not hide his deep resentment and anger. What a good Shengguan you. I really underestimated you. He thought that by inviting her here, he would be able to use all of his strength to deal with her easily. But he never expected Shengguan Yu to be such an iron plate. Not only did her strength increase since the last time they met, she even had more trump cards. This kind of luck was really heaven-defying. If this dragged on, it was really hard to tell who would win or lose. Chu Luyue ignored him and only stared at the Xian formation in front of her. Dumpling stood in front of her and placed her hands on her waist. You've schemed against our Yu several times, right? This time, you even used Grandpa Chu as a hostage to force Yu to come here. Tui! What venerable god expert, I think you're just a despicable and shameless coward. You've done so many things, but you don't even dare to show your true face. Oh, right, I almost forgot, you don't even have a face. You want to bully our Yu. Have you asked for my permission? Dumpling's mouth was like a cannon as she continuously scolded the black-robed man. The black-robed man felt his blood boiling when he heard these words. He wanted to kill her immediately and shut her up forever. You. What about you? You can't even defeat me, and you want to deal with Yu? Tui. You don't even know if you're worthy. You're not convinced? Come on. The black-robed man was so angry that he couldn't say a word. He had lived for so long, but he had never been scolded by a little girl who was still wet behind the ears like this. Chu Ning was dumbfounded. This little girl is, Rong Xiu's lips curved up slightly. This is Yu's contracted magical beast, the scarlet gold heavenly phoenix, which is the one that used to follow by her side. You can call her Dumpling. The previous one didn't look like this. Moreover, how did this contracted magical beast become so powerful? Chu Ning felt that everything she had experienced today was too surreal. Even though he had seen it with his own eyes, he still found it unbelievable. He had just seen how powerful that black-robed man was. However, this Dumpling had actually countered his attack so easily. Moreover, Dumpling didn't look very old, but she had a glib tongue. This Dumpling is extremely smart and powerful, Chu Ning thought for a long time and could only use this euphemism to express it. Rong Xiu's smile deepened. She was brought out by you, so she's naturally different. The black-robed man was already in a state of madness. He had attacked twice in a row, but he didn't even touch Shengguan Yu's body. If this were to spread out, who knew how many people would laugh their heads off? Good. Since you're so arrogant, take my third attack. He suddenly let go of the brilliant sky staff and crossed his hands in front of him. The third level of the brilliant sky staff, returned to heaven. On the black wooden staff, the third rune slowly appeared. Digression: after running around the whole day yesterday, when I was writing at night, I fell asleep again. When I woke up, it was already 3:00 in the morning. I could only write so much at noon and wait until I get home at night. Because I still have to make up for it, it will be around 9:00. Love mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience from LoveNet. Chapter 1664. The sky suddenly darkened. More and more dark clouds gathered, piling up together gloomily. No light could be seen. It was clearly noon, but at this moment, darkness had descended like dusk. Everything in the surroundings was shrouded in a thick layer of shadow. The wind stopped blowing. The wilderness became more and more silent. However, such silence made people feel inexplicably uneasy. The black-robed man suddenly held the brilliant heaven rod with both hands and pointed it to the sky. Go! This voice was distant and boundless, and it reverberated majestically between heaven and earth. Suddenly, the third rune on the brilliant heaven rod suddenly erupted with a blood-colored light beam. It soared to the sky. Swoosh! The void shook. The surrounding energy of heaven and earth was affected, and it also began to shake crazily. The blood-colored light beam shot straight to the sky, and it directly tore a hole in the thick and heavy cloud layer. It was like a stone falling into a calm lake, instantly creating ripples. Above the sky, dark clouds surged, layer upon layer. A blood-colored hole appeared in the black cloud layer. With this as the center, the blood-colored light on the brilliant heaven rod also spread silently to the surroundings. Soon, half of the sky was actually dyed with a layer of shocking blood color. Black and red, these two extreme colors intertwined with each other. Dense killing intent gradually spread, and it crushed towards the ground, almost suffocating people. At this moment, time seemed to pass exceptionally slowly. The blood-colored light beam gushed out from the brilliant heaven rod, and it connected with the sky. Between the dark heaven and earth, this blood-colored light was exceptionally conspicuous. The power above was constantly surging, causing the blood-colored light in the sky to gradually spread out, and the range became wider and wider. Unknowingly, it had already covered a large area of the sky. Chu Luyue and the rest were quietly included in the range of this blood-colored light. Rong Xiu raised his head and looked, and his deep phoenix eyes narrowed dangerously. It seemed that this time, he really intended to take that thing away from you, at all costs. To use this move, he was practically risking his life. There seemed to be waves surging in his eyes, and a thick black gold color flashed past. He gently closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, they had already regained their calmness. Chu Ning stood beside Rong Xiao, her heart in her throat. He clenched his fists tightly and did not even feel his wounds open. His eyes were fixed on Chu Luyue, who was not far away. "You must be safe." This time, the commotion was huge and everyone within 100 miles could see it clearly. Nan Yuxing and his group were no exception. They had been paying close attention to the situation over there, and when they saw the blood-red pillar of light soaring into the sky, they couldn't hide their excitement. "What's that?" Nan Yi frowned, her face filled with curiosity and nervousness. Even from such a distance, she could still sense the terrifying pressure and baleful aura from the blood-red pillar of light. She placed one hand over her heart. The full-powered attack of a venerable god is indeed not to be underestimated. It seems that the black-robed man has made his move. Nan Yuxing narrowed his eyes, his heart filled with lingering fear and delight. The lingering fear was that the black-robed man was indeed very strong. Even if they were not injured, they might not be his match if they joined forces. The delight was that the first to bear the brunt of the attack was undoubtedly Rong Xiao and his group. He has already made up his mind to take their lives, so of course he won't show mercy. Elder Wu Peng's voice was low, and his brows were slightly furrowed as if he was thinking about something. But what?" Nan Yuxing asked subconsciously. Elder Wu Peng paused. "But, until now, I still haven't figured it out. He said that place is his territory. What does this mean?" Nan Yuxing was stunned for a moment. This sentence. Isn't it the literal meaning? Could it be that there are other meanings? Elder Wu Peng fell into silence. Nan Yuxing and his group were still young and did not know much about the god-slaying tomb, but he had heard many rumors about it. Since the shocking battle tens of thousands of years ago, countless god-level experts had fallen in the god-slaying tomb. After a long time, the place was filled with a dense killing intent that had never dissipated. Even a powerful cultivator would have to be extremely careful when entering this place. But he had never heard of anyone who dared to say that the god-slaying tomb was his territory. Even if it was only a small area. One must know that the tomb was full of former top experts. Especially the place where they were just now, which was the tomb of a god-level expert. Just by stepping on it, they might be able to step on the corpse of a god-level expert. And that black-robed man. It seemed that he was not lying. I feel that the aura of that person is somewhat familiar. Elder Bai Tong, who had been silent for a long time, finally recovered some strength and spoke. Everyone turned to look at him. Elder Wu Peng frowned. "Familiar? You recognized his identity?" Elder Bai Tong shook his head. Because of his broken leg, he could only support himself with a crutch. His face was pale, and there was no color on his lips. He looked very haggard. Even his voice had become much weaker. He paused and glanced at Elder Wu Peng with a complicated expression. "Don't you feel that the aura of that man is somewhat similar to the people of the Black Demon Cave?" Black Demon Cave? Elder Wu Peng and the others were stunned. Didn't they go into seclusion a few years ago? Nan Yuxing frowned. The Nan family had no contact with the Black Demon Cave, not to mention after the Black Demon Cave went into seclusion. If Elder Bai Tong had not suddenly mentioned it, Nan Yuxing would not have remembered this name. They have always been arrogant and unbridled, and I heard that everyone in the sect is vicious and merciless. Although I haven't heard much about them in the past few years, those people from the Black Demon Cave are not easy to deal with. Elder Wu Peng was very experienced and had seen many storms. Although he had never confronted the Black Demon Cave head-on, he had heard many rumors about them in the past few years. He did not know what had triggered them in the past few years, but they had suddenly disappeared from the Divine Ruins world. That's not important now. What's important is that man does seem to be from the Black Demon Cave. Elder Wu Peng fell into deep thought. Then why would he appear here, no matter what his identity is, it's fine as long as he can take care of those people. Nan Yuxing waved his hand and said impatiently. They had suffered at the hands of Rong Xiao and Nan Yi, so they naturally wanted to get back at them. Although it was a pity that he could not do it himself, it was also good to be able to take care of them directly. Nan Yi pursed her lips when she heard this, as if she wanted to say something. Nan Yuxing's gaze turned slightly. How could he not guess what she was thinking when he saw her expression? His expression became colder and colder. Are you still thinking about that Rong Xiao? Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1665. Nan Yi came back to her senses and her body trembled slightly. She suddenly looked up at him. Being scrutinized by those stern eyes, she subconsciously looked away. How can that be? They injured us to such an extent, how can I still be thinking about this? Big brother, although I'm usually stubborn and mischievous, I'm not someone who doesn't know what's good for me. Nan Yuxing stared at her for a long time. His gaze was as sharp as a blade, as if he wanted to cut her open and see everything. He only retracted his oppressive gaze when Nan Yi almost couldn't take it anymore. It's good that you know. He is now the enemy of our Nan family. If you still have any thoughts about him. Nan Yi clenched her hands tightly. I won't. Only then did Nan Yuxing relax. That's good. After today, they probably won't be able to walk out of the god-slaying tomb alive. What's the point of thinking about that? The most important thing now is to help you find that thing as soon as possible. At the mention of this, their expressions changed slightly. Ever since they came to the god-slaying tomb, too many things had happened, so much so that they almost forgot this most important task. Eldest young master is right. No matter what's going on over there, it has nothing to do with us. It's just death. Finding that thing as soon as possible is the most important thing. Elder Wu Peng took out a palm-sized bronze octagonal compass as he spoke. On top of it, a transparent needle was vibrating slightly. Wu Peng, are we going to use the star catcher compass now? Elder Baitong was taken aback and hesitated. This thing was extremely precious and could quickly determine the location of that thing. However, every time the star catcher compass was used, it would cost the holder 3 months of his lifespan. Before they came, they had said that they would try their best not to use it. But now, Elder Wu Peng took it out just like that. Elder Wu Peng shook his head. The god-slaying tomb is extremely dangerous and full of variables. From the looks of it, we'd better end the battle quickly and find that thing to leave this place as soon as possible. All 4 of them were injured, and 2 of them were seriously injured and almost couldn't fight anymore. If they didn't use it now, when would they use it? Yes. This place is very strange and dangerous. If we continue to stay here, we don't know what kind of trouble we will encounter. Nan Yi's eyes lit up when she heard that she could leave. Can we go now? This is great. She didn't want to come to the god-slaying mound from the beginning, but her father insisted that she come. He even asked her brother and 2 elders to accompany her. Unable to dissuade him, she could only agree. He originally thought that he was just going through the motions, but who knew that it was actually so dangerous? What she had suffered in the past 2 days was more than what she had suffered in the past 10 years. Now that she could finally leave as soon as possible, of course she was happy. Elder Wu Peng reminded him. Second miss, we still have to find that thing before we can leave. Nan Yi hurriedly nodded. I know. However, as long as he used the star catcher plate, wouldn't he be able to find it very quickly? From the looks of it, Elder Wu Peng did not seem to realize that doing so would deplete Elder Wu Peng's lifespan. Of course, it was also possible that he didn't care at all. Nan Yuxing's brows twitched. He didn't say anything, but his expression showed that he agreed with Nan Yi. They really didn't want to stay here any longer. Elder Baitong opened his mouth, wanting to say something, but in the end, he remained silent and only nodded. Elder Wu Peng closed his eyes. A lustrous glow slowly surged out from the star catcher plate and finally entered the transparent needle. In an instant, the needle seemed to have come to life. It became even more lustrous and transparent, and faintly trembled. Then, the needle finally began to spin. In just a moment, the needle stopped and pointed straight in a certain direction. So fast? Elder Wu Peng opened his eyes in shock. Although the star catcher plate could sense the existence of that thing, it was actually not that accurate. Under normal circumstances, it would take at least 10 minutes to completely confirm the direction. But this time, it was actually so fast. It seems that thing is nearby. Elder Wu Peng had always been expressionless, but at this time, he was actually faintly excited. He had used the star catcher plate to determine the direction 3 times before, and each time, it would consume a lot of energy. But this time, he felt that the star catcher plate had given him the answer as soon as he made a move. This could only prove that the thing they were looking for was not far away from them. Elder Wu Peng took a deep breath, suppressed the excitement in his heart, and looked in the direction of the needle on the star catcher plate. However, what he saw caused him to be stunned on the spot. Because the transparent needle was pointing in the direction they had just escaped. Could it be that thing was over there? Elder Wu Peng's expression changed, and the expressions of the people beside him were even more interesting. They all knew very well what this result meant. How is this possible? Nan Yuxing subconsciously wanted to refute. There must be something wrong with the star catcher plate. Elder Wu Peng, test it again. Elder Bai Tong frowned. Eldest young master, the star catcher plate has never been wrong, and it can't be tested a second time within a month. Besides, every time it is used, Wu Peng will lose a certain amount of his lifespan. The few of them fell silent. After a moment, Nanny couldn't help but ask. Then, doesn't this mean that we have to turn back? They had just escaped death over there. Moreover, anyone could see that the situation over there was dire straits. It was the most dangerous time. Wouldn't they be courting death if they went over now? Elder Wu Peng took a deep breath, put away the star catcher plate, and took the lead to walk forward. Digression, will continue tomorrow. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1666. Even if it was dangerous, since that thing was there, they still had to go over. Elder Wu Peng, Nan Yuxing called out hesitantly. It's the most dangerous time over there now. Why don't we go over later? Elder Wu Peng stopped in his tracks and turned back to look at him expressionlessly. Young master, we're not the only ones looking for that thing. If we're late and miss the opportunity, we'll have come here for nothing. Don't worry, with Bai Tong and I around, we'll definitely ensure the safety of you and 2nd Mississippi. I didn't. That was what he meant. Nan Yuxing took back his words halfway. He felt a little guilty when he heard this. Who were Elder Wu Peng and the others? How could they not see through his thoughts? Nan Yuxing felt a little embarrassed. In fact, he was usually very brave and had never been afraid of anything. Otherwise, he wouldn't have agreed to accompany Nan Yi to the god-slaying tomb. But he didn't expect this place to be more dangerous than he had imagined. He had suffered a lot of accidents and torture in the past 2 days. Every time he thought about it, he felt that his body hurt even more. Seeing Elder Wu Peng's firm attitude and that it was to find that thing, this reason was really irrefutable. Nan Yuxing hesitated for a while before he gritted his teeth and agreed. You're right. In this situation, we'd better find that thing and leave as soon as possible. Although Nanny was very scared, she couldn't refuse since everyone had said that they would go. Besides, it was her job to look for that thing. She followed, as if to persuade Nan Yuxing, but also as if to comfort herself. Actually, I think that the battle over there might be over by the time we get there. Anyway, that black-robed man's target isn't us. After he's done, he probably won't deliberately find trouble with us." Elder Wu Peng looked ahead with a frown, and a trace of worry flashed in his eyes. If that was the case, it couldn't be better. But, that man said that it was his territory. If the thing was really there, then it wouldn't be so easy for them to take it away. Half of the sky had already been dyed the color of blood. An invisible pressure and murderous aura surged wildly between heaven and earth, almost making it difficult to breathe. Rong Xiao waved his sleeve and set up a barrier around Chu Ning. Tuanzi raised her head and took a look. What the hell is this? That cold and gloomy aura really made her uncomfortable. She waved her small hand, and a scarlet gold flame whip instantly lashed out. Pa! The sound of something breaking through the air resounded. In the blink of an eye, the flaming whip had already arrived in front of the blood-colored pillar of light. However, as soon as the fire whip wrapped around it, a strange sizzling sound was heard. At the same time, a black mist drifted out. Accompanying it was an unbearable stench. The flame whip began to corrode at a speed visible to the naked eye. After a short while, the golden red whip broke in the middle. Furthermore, the parts that were wrapped around it were completely corroded. Dumpling was shocked and her eyes widened. She could hardly believe what she was seeing. Ever since she opened her fourth meridian and inherited her ancestors' power, she had been successful in every endeavor. This was the first time she had suffered a loss. From this, it could be seen that the other party's strength was much stronger than before. The black-robed man suddenly sneered. "Since you're so arrogant, try out the power of the third level first." As soon as he said that, the clouds in the sky suddenly moved. A thick blood-red color quickly condensed and transformed into an icicle that pierced downwards. Chi! The sharp sound of something breaking through the air caused one's scalp to tingle. It headed straight for Dumpling. Dumpling raised her head. The icicle was very long and about the height of a person. It was blood-red with a blunt top and sharp bottom, and had a cold luster. It descended from the sky at an increasing speed. Before it even arrived, she could already sense that extremely dangerous aura. A strong wind blew, and the golden bell on her head jingled as her skirt fluttered. From afar, it looked like a scarlet gold flame burning fiercely. She snorted softly, and with a tap of her toes, her small figure flew up instantly. He had chosen to face the attack head-on. In the blink of an eye, the two forces collided fiercely. Dumpling's fist was instantly cut by that sharp spike. An intense pain came instantly. Dumpling's brows furrowed. Ever since she transformed into her human form, she had never suffered a flesh wound. She snorted coldly, and her fist was suddenly covered with a layer of scarlet gold flame. That flame surged out in clusters, overlapping with each other. At a glance, it looked like layers of complicated feathers. The blood-red icicle finally stopped. Blood flowed continuously from Dumpling's hand, but that icicle was unable to move any further. Both parties were in a stalemate. At this moment, the scene seemed to have stopped. But in reality, both parties were still crazily killing each other. Dumpling's arms started to tremble slightly. She clenched her teeth and stimulated all the energy in her body. If they wanted to touch Ayu, they had to pass through her first. However, as time passed slowly, the power of the icicle did not decrease, but increased instead. Humph! Overestimating yourself. The black-robed man sneered disdainfully. How could the third level of the brilliant sky rod be so easily dealt with? As long as the brilliant sky rod was still there, this blood-red light pillar could continuously devour the surrounding energy of heaven and earth, turn it into its own use, and pour it into the icicle. In other words, on the surface, this crimson gold sky phoenix was fighting with an icicle, but in reality, it was fighting against the brilliant sky rod that had erupted with all its strength. If the clan leader of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan was here, he might be able to put up a fight. But this little thing was simply not enough. Break! The black-robed man suddenly burst out with a cold shout. The blood-red color in the sky swayed even more and continued to pour energy into the icicle. That icicle had already pierced Dumpling's palm. In an instant, blood began to gush out at an even more shocking speed. Half of Dumpling's arm was stained with blood. Her round and adorable little face was also gradually turning pale at this moment. Needless to say, her little body was trembling even more violently. No, you was below. Once she failed, you would definitely be in danger. Dumpling gritted her teeth. The flames on her body had completely burned, almost covering her entire body. However, her body finally took half a step back uncontrollably. At the same time, her entire hand was almost pierced through by the icicle. Die! The black-robed man raised his hand and then suddenly pressed down. That icicle seemed to be urged by this force and continued to pierce downwards. At this moment, an extremely cold voice suddenly rang out. I think, damn it, it's you. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1667. The black-robed man was shocked and turned his head to look, only to see that Chu Luyue had already finished outlining the profound formation in front of her at some point in time. A vast and mighty pressure slowly spread out from above. This aura caused his heart to unconsciously tremble. Grand Mystic Emperor Division. He almost blurted out in disbelief. When did she break through to this level? He actually didn't know at all. Moreover, how old was she now? How could she break through to the Grand Mystic Emperor Division so easily? Chu Luyue looked up slightly, her eyes clear and cold. Soon after, her somewhat pale lips slightly curled up, revealing a smile of unknown meaning. Even if she couldn't see the black-robed man's face, it wasn't hard for her to imagine his shock and astonishment, as well as a trace of unconcealable panic. You're very surprised? Chu Luyue asked softly. Actually, it's quite a coincidence. I just happened to break through right before you came, and right here. What, isn't this your territory? You don't even know this? Chu Luyue's words were like a sudden clap of thunder that suddenly exploded beside the black-robed man's ears. It caused his mind to tremble. How is that possible? If that was really the case, he would definitely know at the first moment. How could it be that only now, suddenly, his voice paused, as if he thought of something? Could it be, not knowing if it was an illusion or not, Chu Luyue actually heard a trace of panic from his tone? Panic? This person was arrogant, unbridled, and practically didn't put anyone in his eyes. From the moment they arrived, he put on an appearance that said he wasn't to be trifled with. Why was he suddenly panicking out of nowhere now? Did her words remind him of something? Chu Luyue narrowed her eyes, but couldn't be bothered to pay attention to him. She raised her eyes to look at Dumpling, who was currently confronting that icicle. When she saw Dumpling's bloody little hand, the last trace of a smile on her face quickly faded, and what replaced it was an undisguised strong killing intent. Minor Sky Shuttle Formation. Go! With a clear shout, Chu Luyue pushed the profound formation in front of her forward. The huge silver profound formation slowly floated up. The surrounding god realms seemed to have sensed something and nimbly avoided it one after another. Soon, the huge silver Xian formation was suspended in mid-air. It passed Dumpling's body, then floated to the top of Dumpling's head on to directly meet that icicle. With the help of this Xian formation, Tuanzi immediately felt relieved. At the same time, several streams of light lingered above the profound formation, binding the icicles. Then, it suddenly tightened. Crack! The crisp sound of something shattering could be heard. The icicle. Tuanzi was finally able to break free and fell down. Chu Luyue quickly went forward and hugged Tuanzi. Feeling, dumpling God, Chu Liu of the God, of Chu, of God, of Chu. Chu Luyue patted her back with heartache. Dumpling, it's been hard on you. She took a look at Dumpling's hand. Her chubby little hand was almost pierced through. Her flesh was twisted and blood was dripping. She took a deep breath. A chill swept through her lungs, but it also felt like there was a ball of fire burning inside. It hurts a lot, right? Her voice was even softer, but her hands were even more nimble. She quickly took out an elixir and fed it to Dumpling. Dumpling nestled in her arms obediently and shook her head. It doesn't hurt. It's good that you is fine. Chu Luyue put her down carefully. Then, she took out medicine and gauze and carefully bandaged her wounds. Dumpling was afraid that she would be worried. She retracted her hand slightly and said in a crisp voice, I'm fine. These are all superficial wounds. They will heal very quickly. The crimson gold heavenly phoenix was an ancient divine beast. Her recovery ability was indeed extraordinary. But at this moment, her wound was truly a ghastly sight. Chu Luyue's eyes drooped slightly. Her hands were even gentler. Ever since Dumpling transformed into a human, she felt more and more sorry for her. Now that she was injured, and it was caused by protecting her, how could she not care? Moreover, the icicles were very eerie and strange. She didn't know if there was something dirty in them. She had to personally make sure that they were dealt with properly. Chu Luyue didn't say anything. Dumpling frowned. I'm really fine. Chu Luyue finally stopped and looked up at Dumpling. I said that I would take good care of you in the future. I would never let you suffer. I will definitely do what I say. Dumpling's eyes reddened and her mouth flattened. Chu Luyue took her hand. Now, does it still hurt? Dumpling nodded sadly. It hurts. Chu Luyue hugged her again. If it hurts, I'll take revenge for you. She raised her head slightly and looked at the silver Xian formation. At this moment, it was suspended in the air and slowly rotating. It silently crushed the icicles and blocked all the threats on it. What was even more shocking was that the Xian formation was also crazily devouring the surrounding energy of heaven and earth and growing stronger. As the aura on it grew stronger, the Xian formation also started to expand. It was getting closer and closer to the blood-colored light pillar. This was taking the initiative to attack. The black-robed man was completely stunned. He felt that before he could react, Chu Luyue's Xian formation had already started to attack. The most shocking thing was that it seemed to really have the power to contend with the brilliant sky rod. Even a great Xian King Master might not be able to do this, right? Moreover, she had just broken through. He suddenly raised his head and stared at the slowly rotating silver Xian formation that was still expanding. He didn't recognize this Xian formation. He only vaguely remembered that Chu Luyue had mentioned it before. It seemed to be some minor sky shuttle formation. Chu Luyue's lips curled into a cold smile. Ordinary Xian formations naturally couldn't contend with a venerable god expert. However, this minor sky shuttle formation was different. Because it was a new Xian formation created by Chu Luyue after simplifying the sky shuttle formation. Although its overall power wasn't as strong as the real sky shuttle formation, Chu Luyue had learned quite a bit of its essence. Therefore, the power it could unleash was absolutely outstanding. The reason why Chu Luyue could unleash this Xian formation that was obviously stronger than her current strength was largely thanks to Debao. If he hadn't asked her to memorize those Xian formations by heart, if he hadn't helped her try to repair the sky shuttle formation, she definitely wouldn't have been able to do all these. This minor sky shuttle formation had almost exhausted all her strength. Victory or defeat depended on this one move. Rumble. The brilliant sky rod seemed to have sensed the threat. The blood-colored light pillar on it was affected by the energy and started to sway chaotically. The power that spread out in the sky also started to surge violently. The black-robed man slammed his palm on the brilliant sky rod. Thousand Peak Summit. In an instant, countless blood-colored icicles rapidly condensed and fell crazily. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1668. Almost at the same time, the minor sky shuttle formation shone brightly. The two sides clashed fiercely. Soon, the icicles were all swallowed by the silver flowing light. After that, there was a series of crackling sounds. The icicles were all quickly and completely shattered by the power of the minor sky shuttle formation. The black-robed man's body swayed, and he almost fell to the ground. After this attack, the blood-red color in the sky almost completely dissipated. Only the blood-red pillar of light was left, and it was on the verge of collapse. The minor sky shuttle formation continued to approach. Finally, its edge collided with the blood-red pillar of light. The peerlessly formidable forces from both sides devoured each other without the slightest sound. Only the space in the surroundings that was constantly collapsing showed how intense the battle was at this moment. Nan Yuxing and the others were walking forward. Perhaps because they knew that the road ahead was dangerous, the atmosphere was tense. Suddenly, Elder Wu Peng stopped in his tracks. Wait! Hearing this, the few people behind him immediately stopped. Elder Bai Tong saw that his expression was not right, and followed his line of sight. What's wrong? It seemed that there was nothing wrong. Elder Wu Peng said in a low voice. Look at the sky over there. Just a moment ago, it was still shrouded in blood, but now, it has suddenly disappeared. Only layers of dark clouds were left, and it was terrifyingly dark. After his reminder, the others suddenly understood. What does this mean? Nan Yuxing frowned. Elder Wu Peng paused, and his voice was even lower and colder. If I'm not wrong, the blood in the sky must be caused by the black-robed man. But now it's suddenly dissipated. It's really strange. Isn't that the end? Nan Yuxing asked. What was there to worry about? Since they came here, they had already decided to take the risk, hadn't they? Wasn't it a little too late to worry now? Elder Bai Tong suddenly thought of something, and his expression froze. You mean? Rong Xiu's successful counterattack caused this situation? Elder Wu Peng shook his head. I'm not sure either. He did not see it with his own eyes, so everything was just a guess. How is that possible? Nan Yuxing immediately retorted. They had seen the black-robed man's strength. Even if Rong Xiu teamed up, it was impossible for them to win. Elder Wu Peng, I think you're worrying too much. Was it really that easy to defeat a god highness? Elder Wu Peng frowned and nodded. Maybe I'm thinking too much. Let's continue. However, the further they went, the more dangerous it became. We should be more careful, it's never wrong. After saying that, they continued to walk forward. The battle between the minor sky shuttle formation and the blood-colored pillar of light continued. The surroundings were silent, and the air seemed to have frozen. Everyone's gazes were now focused on that spot. They both understood that this was an all-out attack from both sides. Win or lose, it all depended on this match. Suddenly, a faint cracking sound was heard. A crack suddenly appeared on the small sky shuttle formation. Chu Liuyue's heart sank. It was as if a crack had appeared on the embankment. Even though it was small, it still couldn't be ignored. 1,000-li dike can be destroyed by an ant hole. The surrounding energy was still surging, battering against the opening again and again. Gradually, that crack began to expand. The power of the entire minor sky shuttle formation was rapidly decreasing. Anyone with a discerning eye could see that in the end, the blood-colored pillar of light still had the upper hand in this battle. At this point, the black-robed man's heart finally calmed down. He clenched his fists and sneered. "Shangguan Yu, you're indeed powerful. If you were given a few more years, you would be able to fight me head-on. Unfortunately, you're still a little lacking." He was definitely going to win this match. As he spoke, a long crack had already appeared on the minor sky shuttle formation, and the speed of its rotation was gradually slowing down. In the end, it had almost completely stopped. The blood-colored pillar of light was constantly corroding the huge silver Xian formation. As the black fog drifted away, a thick stench spread to the surroundings, making people feel nauseous. Even though most of the power of the blood-colored light beam had been reduced in this battle, it was still the one with the upper hand relatively speaking. Seeing this, Chu Ning couldn't help but step forward, becoming increasingly anxious. If it weren't for Rong Xiu's barrier, he wouldn't have been able to hold himself back and rushed forward. He didn't notice that the bloodstains on his palms were rapidly fading away. Moreover, a warm aura suddenly surged in his dantian, and then quickly spread to his limbs and bones. It was only when the scorching heat reached his hands that he finally realized that something was wrong, and he quickly lowered his head to take a look. What he saw caused his pupils to shrink slightly. Because the numerous wounds on his hands had already recovered by more than half. Chu Ning's brows were tightly knitted, but there was no shock in the depths of his eyes. Because this wasn't the first time this had happened. It was just that he had been in a daze most of the time, and he had been thinking about you, all along, so he didn't take this matter to heart. Who knew that it would start again now? At this moment, a loud explosion suddenly came from the front. Chu Ning immediately raised his head to look. The huge silver Xian formation had completely collapsed. Countless violent energies crazily spread in all directions. The blood-colored pillar of light suddenly slashed down from the sky. Like a blood sword, it slashed directly at Chu Luyue. She suddenly raised her head. "Digression, I finally had a good sleep yesterday, and I, am back." 6 p.m. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1669. Countless divine realms gathered around her and formed a huge barrier around her. However, the blood-red light beam was extremely sharp and carried a shocking murderous intent. It tore through the air. Even the deity domains trembled violently and then collapsed one after another. The black-robed man sneered. "You are indeed capable to be able to get them to help you. However, no matter what, these are only the divine realms of high god powerhouses." It was no different from wishful thinking if she wanted to fight against a high god powerhouse. The blood-red light beam was getting closer and closer. Chu Liyue's hair was swept up by the strong wind, and her clothes flapped wildly. "You," Dumpling called her nervously and instinctively wanted to go forward. Chu Liyue turned around and put her behind her, while she stood in front of her. Dumpling grabbed her sleeve and refused to let go. You wanted to stand in front of her? However, the Xian formation just now had almost exhausted all of Yu's strength. At this moment, how could she block this attack? However, it was different for her. She was a crimson blood celestial phoenix. Her physical strength was strong to begin with, and she had inherited the strength of her ancestors. She would have no problem dealing with this. However, before she could say anything, Chu Liyue spoke first. "Stay behind me." This was not a question, nor was it a compromise. It was an unquestionable order. Dumpling looked up and wanted to say something. Chu Liyue had already turned around, took a step forward, and picked up the black shield from the ground. She crossed her legs slightly and placed the black shield in front of her. Since the appearance of those stones, everyone present had almost forgotten about the black shield's existence. Seeing Chu Liyue pick it up again, the black-robed man was stunned at first, but then he snorted disdainfully. If it was before, he might have been a little afraid of the black shield. But now, he had already used the third stage of the brilliant sky staff. This was not a threat at all. At the same time, the blood-red light beam had already slammed down. Chu Luyue held the shield high and stood in front of himself and Dumpling. Boom! An incomparably powerful force smashed heavily onto the black shield. Chu Luyue's arm instantly went numb. His body trembled violently, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. Even the ground beneath her feet had sunk in deeply, and several cracks had appeared in the surroundings. From this, it could be seen how terrifying the power contained in this attack was. However, only a shallow mark was left on the black shield, but it did not crack. As for Chu Luyue, after forcefully swallowing the remaining blood in his chest, he was actually able to hold on. The black-robed man suddenly took a step forward. How could this be? Even if several high gods joined forces, they would not be able to withstand the brilliant sky staff's attack. What happened to Shengguanyu? You seem disappointed that I didn't die. Chu Luyue raised his eyes, and the corner of his mouth that was dripping with blood slowly curved into an arrogant and unbridled smile. His clear eyes were filled with a raging battle intent. Seeing her smile, the black-robed man suddenly felt uneasy. No, he clenched the brilliant sky staff in his hand tightly, but his arms were trembling uncontrollably. You were the one who attacked previously. Now, it should be my turn, right? Chu Luyue said slowly. As soon as she finished speaking, her eyes shone brightly. Whoosh! The stones that were scattered around her suddenly seemed to have been summoned by something, and they began to roll restlessly. Whoosh! Scarlet Cloud Sword suddenly appeared in her hand, and it shone with a cold light. When the black-robed man saw Scarlet Cloud Sword, he heaved a sigh of relief. Although it was a venerable divine weapon, she could not unleash its full power due to her current cultivation level. It was nothing to be afraid of. However, just as this thought flashed through his mind, he realized that something was wrong. This was because he realized that the deity territory had suddenly begun to rush towards Scarlet Cloud Sword. They transformed into streaks of light and condensed on the bright and sharp Scarlet Heaven Sword. Soon, Scarlet Cloud Sword was covered in a layer of extremely dazzling light. From afar, it was filled with brilliant lights and vibrant colors. At the same time, a shocking pressure surged out from it. Sensing that terrifying aura, the black-robed man subconsciously took half a step back. She actually fused all the battle intent contained in the deity territory into Scarlet Cloud Sword. Although it was not a complete fusion, it had indeed greatly increased Scarlet Cloud Sword's power. One had to know that although these deity territories were not very strong, the battle intent surging within them was left behind from the shocking battle tens of thousands of years ago. It was extremely terrifying. Once it was condensed, it would be extremely terrifying. Shengguanyu. How did she think of this? Actually, Chu Luyue did this purely because she had a sudden inspiration and had a sudden idea. She knew very well that she was definitely not a match for this black-robed man with her own strength. Therefore, she had to rely on external forces. Thus, she thought of these stones. Rong Xiao had once said that these stones contained astonishing battle intent. She thought that perhaps she could borrow their strength to fight. In the end, things went smoother than expected. These stones seemed to be exceptionally obedient. She had only used her mind, and they were extremely cooperative. Therefore, even if it was the first time she tried to use this method, the effect was surprisingly good. Sensing the surging battle intent on Scarlet Cloud Sword, Chu Luyue felt even more confident. She held the hilt of the sword tightly with one hand. When the last bit of battle intent had completely merged, she finally raised the sword. It fell fiercely. This sword did not have any tricks. It was extremely simple and neat. Chi. The sword light flickered, and the blood-colored light pillar was directly cut in half and completely disintegrated. The sword chi did not stop. Instead, it approached at an even more astonishing speed. It went straight for the black-robed man. The black-robed man knew that things were not good. He tapped the tip of his foot and immediately retreated. However, he was fast, but the sword chi was faster. In the blink of an eye, it was already in front of him. Helpless, he could only raise the brilliant sky staff in front of him. Clang! Crack! Almost at the same time that the sword chi fell, a crisp cracking sound was suddenly heard. A crack had appeared on the brilliant sky staff. The tyrannical sword chi wrapped around the black-robed man, and his black robe fluttered crazily. He began to frantically mobilize the strength of his body. However, the 3 attacks of the brilliant sky staff had exhausted all his strength. At this moment, he could no longer attack. In a hurry, he began to look around as if he was waiting for something. However, there was nothing. He became more and more anxious. It should not be like this. This was the tomb of the honored god. He had already fallen into such a situation. Why was there no movement? Chi! His hood was finally torn apart with a loud noise. Sensing this change, his mind suddenly panicked. In a battle between experts, a small mistake was enough to determine the outcome of the battle. Therefore, in the next moment, his defense completely collapsed, and his body flew out uncontrollably. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1670. At the same time, the hood on his head was finally torn apart completely, revealing his true appearance. When he fell to the ground, his first reaction was to cover his face with his sleeves. However, everyone present had excellent eyesight. It was obvious that it was useless for him to cover up now. Chu Luyue narrowed his eyes. It was the face of a man who looked to be in his 30s. His appearance was ordinary and his facial features were ordinary. He was unremarkable in the crowd. However, his eyes, were pure black. At a glance, it was empty and dark. It was indeed strange. Perhaps because he had suffered a series of huge blows, his body had become much more illusory and his aura was weak. The brilliant sky staff had been broken into 2. Half of it fell to the ground while the other half was still tightly held in his palm. The cut was smooth and neat. It was obvious how powerful the sword just now was. Of course, that did not mean that Chu Luyue was stronger than the other party. It could only be said that the battle intent in those stones was too strong. It was so strong that the sword cut him. Chu Luyue walked forward. The black-robed man trembled instinctively and wanted to retreat. However, he realized that his body seemed to be nailed to the ground and could not move. He was shocked and looked around in panic again. The vast and boundless wilderness was empty, silent, and cold. There were only pieces of broken tombstones that stood in a mess and did not move. There was no response. Just like the previous situation, the tombs had actually severed the connection between him and the tombs, and he had been completely abandoned. How could this be? How could this be? He could not figure it out. It had been fine for the past few years. He could borrow the power here and use it for himself. That was why he dared to say that this was his territory. But now, everything had become a lie. A pair of boots appeared in the corner of his eyes. His body froze and he suddenly stopped all his movements. The air seemed to have frozen. A dazzling sword light cut through the void and stabbed straight at him. Swoosh! The tip of the sword was pointed at his glabella. It was just an inch away. As long as Chu Luyue wanted to, she could take his life directly. However, she did not make a move immediately. There were too many secrets hidden in this man. It would be a pity if she killed him just like that. What are you looking for? Chu Luiyue tilted his head and asked indifferently. She could clearly see that the man had been looking left and right since just now, as if he was looking for something or waiting for something. The black-robed man glanced at the broken brilliant heaven rod in his hand, and suddenly sneered. Then, he casually threw away the remaining half. "Don't you know what I'm looking for?" His words were filled with mockery. Chu Luiyue narrowed his eyes slightly. Before she could say anything, the man had already closed his eyes. "If you agree to a bet, you must accept your loss. Since I've lost to you today, then, you can kill me or torture me as you wish." He never thought of begging for mercy. Because he knew better than anyone that at this time, living was more painful than dying. It could only be said that there was a careless mistake. He had underestimated Sheng Guanyu. Chu Luiyue found it even more interesting to see him begging for death. His pale lips curled into a cold smile. "All these years, you've attacked me many times. Now, you want to die? How can there be such a good thing?" The black-robed man's heart sank, and he suddenly opened his eyes. "What do you want?" He knew her quite well. This woman was not easy to deal with. If he really fell into her hands, she would definitely have the means to make him suffer a fate worse than death. Chu Luiyue raised her chin. "I don't want anything. I've always been a person who believes in reciprocity. You must have put in a lot of effort to give me those gifts before, so of course I have to return the favor. Let me ask you a few questions. If I'm satisfied with your answers, I'll give you a quick end. How about that?" The black-robed man took a deep breath, but his heart was still burning. He sneered. "What if you're still not satisfied with my answers?" Chu Luiyue shrugged. "Then you can only blame yourself for being unlucky." Shameless. The black-robed man had already expected her to do this, so he did not intend to agree to her request from the beginning. He closed his eyes again, as if he had already made up his mind not to give her any answer. Chu Luiyue did not mind. She put down the black shield and took out the black wooden tablet. She weighed it in her hand and asked with interest, "This thing is very important to the people of the Black Demon Cave, but since you've already betrayed us, I presume this thing is of no use to you?" The black-robed man refused to answer, his attitude firm. Chu Luiyue glanced at him, then handed the black wooden tablet to Dumpling. "Dumpling, get rid of this eyesore." "Okay." Dumpling agreed crisply and took the wooden tablet. Her other hand was not injured, so she exerted force and the wooden tablet was reduced to dust. The black-robed man did not even bat an eyelid. Chu Luiyue nodded in understanding. "It seems that you really have no connection with the Black Demon Cave, and you found another way to store this soul. If I'm not wrong, it should be this black robe?" Hearing this, the man suddenly opened his eyes. When he saw that Chu Luiyue seemed to have confirmed something, he came back to his senses and gritted his teeth. "You tricked me." Chu Luiyue smiled. "I was just guessing. Who knew that you would admit it so quickly?" Without a physical body, the soul had to find something to store in order to successfully survive for a long time. Just like Taizu back then, several souls were separated and stored in the Dragon Abyss sword and the Jade Pendant. And this man dared to use this black wooden tablet as bait and put it in her hands, which meant that he did not care about it. The higher the level of a person from the Black Demon Cave, the closer the connection with this wooden tablet. Based on this man's strength, he could not have easily broken free from this layer of restraint. He must have used some method to forcibly break free, otherwise, he wouldn't have had such confidence. Chu Luiyue sized him up for a while. The black-robed man turned his gaze away. After that, no matter what Chu Luiyue said, he refused to speak. Chu Luiyue frowned slightly. At this moment, Rong Xiao suddenly said, "Mo Shiqian still doesn't know that you're hiding here, right?" Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1671. These words finally caused the man to react. He suddenly looked at Rongxiu, his eyes filled with bewilderment. What do you know? There was a hint of panic and fear in his words. Obviously, he was fearful and in awe of the Mo Shiqian that Rongxiu mentioned. Seeing his reaction, Chu Luyue asked curiously, "Why are you still here?" Mo Shiqian, why does this name sound so familiar? Rongxiu raised his eyebrows. The leader of the Black Demon Cave. At the same time, he was also his former master. Chu Luyue suddenly understood. No wonder. She had indeed heard of this name before. It was just that a few years had passed, and she had lost a lot of memories in the middle, so she did not immediately recall it. Only when Rongxiu said this did she recall. The black-robed man's expression turned even uglier. He stared at Rongxiu with a deadly gaze, afraid that the latter would say something shocking. However, Rongxiu did not continue to pay attention to him after asking this question. Instead, he walked in front of Chu Luyue and held her hand. A gentle force quickly entered her body, tidying up the wild force around her bit by bit, and at the same time healing her injuries. I'm here. Don't force yourself. Rongxiu's voice was low and gentle. Chu Luyue immediately heaved a sigh of relief. Previously, she had indeed been barely holding on. After going through such a fierce battle, her strength had been completely exhausted. Even with the help of external forces, her body was still suffering from considerable pain and torment. It was just that she had been tense and did not dare to reveal anything. It was only now that she heard Rongxiu's whisper and felt the endless power and heat in his palm that she finally relaxed a little. Did you have a good fight? Rongxiu looked down at her and asked. Chu Luyue raised her head slightly and met his eyes. There were many things that did not need to be said. A look was enough. The corners of her mouth slowly raised into a smile, and she nodded with curved eyes. Yes. Everything that he had suffered before was finally paid back. She had been holding it in for several years, and now she was finally able to release it. Awesome. Seeing her happy, Rongxiu's thin lips also slightly raised a curve. That's good. You can leave the rest to me, right? Chu Luyue blushed slightly, but a warm current gushed out from the bottom of her heart. Even her limbs and bones warmed up. Others might find it strange that Rongxiu did not make a move from the beginning to the end. Only she knew that Rongxiu had done this on purpose. She had been pestered by this man for many years, and now she could finally settle all their grudges. In the end, it was best for him to take revenge with his own hands. Rongxiu had been watching everything from the side. He must have been having a hard time waiting, right? Chu Luyue gently nodded, then couldn't help but ask, "That's right. Leave his life to me." Rongxiu held his forehead helplessly, and the smile on his lips deepened. I know. Other than when the two of them first met, when he helped her kill someone and made her unhappy, he had never made the same mistake again. This was also the reason why he didn't do it even though he had several opportunities to kill people. Chu Ning also came over at this time. Are you alright? Even though the outcome was already decided, he still felt a lingering fear when he thought of what happened just now. At this moment, seeing her pale face, his heart was still throbbing with pain. Rongxiu let go of Chu Luyue's hand. You go accompany Lord Chu Ning. I'll interrogate him. It wasn't easy for father and daughter to reunite, so they needed more time to spend together. Chu Luyue glanced at Rongxiu. This man could always guess what she was thinking, and could always take care of all her feelings. She nodded and turned to look at Chu Ning. Father. This call made Chu Ning's nose ache. He looked at Chu Luyue carefully. She was right in front of him. He clearly had a lot to say, but after seeing the face that he had been thinking about day and night, he suddenly couldn't say those words. After a while, Chu Ning said, good, good. You has grown up. This face was still the familiar face in his memory, but it had changed a lot. The youthful aura between her eyebrows had quietly dissipated. It was replaced by a subduing heroic spirit. Furthermore, there was an indescribable aura of nobility around her. That was a temperament that came from her bones. Just by standing there, she made people unconsciously submit to her. Chu Ning looked at her without blinking. She was obviously very familiar, but she was obviously different from the person in his memory. Looking at him emotional but not daring to step forward, Chu Liuyue's eyes suddenly turned red. Father, Yu has made you suffer. Looking at the dense tears in her eyes, all the messy thoughts in Chu Ning's heart flew away in an instant, leaving only heartache. He hurriedly reached out to wipe her tears. No, our Yu is the best. Don't cry, Yu don't cry. Father's heart aches. Chu Luyue rarely cried. Although her eyes were red, she had been holding it in. But when she heard this, she suddenly couldn't help but cry. But she quickly held back the remaining tears. It was already a blessing in life to be able to see each other again. She couldn't be happier, let alone other things. With this, the final invisible barrier between the father and daughter was shattered. Tuanzi grabbed Chu Luyue's clothes with one hand and looked up at her. Then, it looked at Chu Luyue and Chu Ning before breaking into a smile. On the other side, Rong Xiao stood in front of the black-robed man. The black-robed man became more and more nervous. Rong Xiao raised his sword-like eyebrows slightly and said with a faint smile, "If he knows that you are snatching something from him, guess how he will react?" Digression, I really don't have any more. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1672. The black-robed man clenched his fists unconsciously. Even though he had left the Black Demon Cave for several years, every time he heard that person's name, his heart would still tremble. It was still the same today. He opened his mouth, wanting to defend himself, but he didn't know what to say. Rong Xiao's gaze was like a sharp blade, piercing straight into his heart. It was as if all lies were jokes in front of him. How do you know all this? Not many people knew that Mo Shiqian was also looking for that water droplet. In fact, in comparison, he was the one who was more high-profile. However, Mo Shiqian had always been cautious, especially in the past few years. This time, he deliberately led Sheng Guanyu here to avoid the eyes of the Black Demon Cave. However, I did not expect Rong Xiao to actually, he already came to find me. How do you think I know? Rong Xiao raised his eyebrows slightly. If not for the fact that he can't leave the Black Demon Cave now, do you think you can live safely until today? The black-robed man gritted his teeth. The silence was almost suffocating. Hearing this, Chu Luyue blinked in surprise. Mo Shiqian went to look for you? Rong Xiao looked back, a faint smile on his lips. To be precise, you've seen him before. The one who appeared in the northern region of the primordial world was his illusion. Chu Luyue's heart skipped a beat. So that person was Mo Shiqian. She knew that other than the black-robed man, there had always been people who wanted to attack her, but she didn't think of this. Although she had met the other party before, the other party had never shown his true appearance, so she didn't know much about the other party. Unexpectedly, Rong Xiao glanced at the black-robed man and said indifferently, "A few years ago, Mo Shiqian had a capable subordinate, Shan Chen. This person was talented and deeply trusted by Mo Shiqian. In just a few years, he grew from a nobody to Mo Shiqian's right-hand man. Rumor has it that Mo Shiqian once planned to leave the position of the head of the 8 Hall Masters to him. Unfortunately, before the celebration, this person inexplicably disappeared and there has been no news since then. Furthermore, all information related to this person in the Black Demon Cave was sealed and wiped out overnight. It's as if this person never existed. Many people thought that he was dead. But who would have thought that the once all-powerful figure in the Black Demon Cave was actually hiding in the god-slaying mound for several years? Rong Xiao spoke slowly, but every word he said was like a steel knife, fiercely scraping the man in the black robe. His expression changed from shock, suspicion, and disbelief to deep despair and fear. Originally, he wanted to deny it, but Rong Xiao had said it so clearly. With just a few words, he had completely exposed him. What else was there to refute? When Chu Luyue heard this, he also understood something. He looked at the black-robed man and frowned. You betrayed the Black Demon Cave in order to steal my things? The black-robed man suddenly sneered. Don't you already know? Why are you asking me again? His attitude was arrogant and perverse. Obviously, he did not intend to cooperate. Rong Xiao was not in a hurry. He said calmly, if you speak properly, I'll give you a quick death. If you continue to be like this, I think Mo Shiqian will be happy to receive this gift. These words finally made the black-robed man waver. He would rather die in the hands of these two people than go back to face Mo Shiqian. What he had done all these years was definitely enough for him to suffer a fate worse than death countless times. After a long silence, he finally gritted his teeth and said, Do you mean what you say? If I say it and you go back on your word in the end, what will happen? Rong Xiao chuckled. Is it your turn to bargain now? The black-robed man immediately fell silent. No matter what he chose, it was a dead end. The only difference was whether the pain before death was more or less. After a while, he finally said, I'll say it. Actually, the Black Demon Cave has been searching for that thing since many years ago. A few years ago, by chance, the Lord, Mo Shiqian received news that that thing might be born, so he personally led a few people to go. I was one of them. At that time, although we knew what he was looking for, we didn't know the details. We only knew that it was very important to him. Later, we finally found traces of that thing. We searched for it for a long time without sleep or rest. We experienced countless difficulties and dangers in the process. In the end, when we finally saw that thing, only he and I were still alive. I thought that things would end once we found it. But it turned out that I was just overthinking. The black-robed man suddenly laughed self-deprecatingly. That thing has intelligence and refused to give in. It fought with us. It was also because of that battle that my body was damaged and he was seriously injured. As a result, he can't leave the Black Demon Cave until today. Chu Luyue frowned. She really didn't know about these things. She remembered that when she obtained this water droplet, it was actually an extremely coincidental situation. Moreover, at that time, she didn't even see what it was before it forcefully entered her body. Intelligence. It did have intelligence, but it didn't seem to resist or fight. Why did he say, it was so difficult and dangerous? There was a trace of hatred in the black-robed man's voice. At that time, in order to snatch that thing, he wanted to refine my soul and use it as a primer to subdue it. Unfortunately, I noticed it and tried my best to escape. Later, I accidentally broke into the god-slaying tomb and obtained an opportunity here. I stayed here and severed all ties with the Black Demon Cave. So Mo Shiqian had once wanted to kill him. No wonder, your connection with the black wooden token was also cut off at that time, right? Chu Luyue asked. The black-robed man closed his eyes. That's right. He wanted to refine my soul, so he removed the restriction, which gave me a chance to escape. Because of this, the people of the Black Demon Cave have never found any trace of me all these years. She didn't know if it was fortunate or unfortunate. From then on, I knew that that thing was the most precious treasure in the world. If I wanted to take revenge, I had to snatch it. Unfortunately, whether it was him or me, we were one step behind you. The black-robed man stared at Chu Luyue and suddenly sneered. Actually, to be precise, that thing chose you. No matter how hard others tried, it was still useless. He didn't believe it before, but now, he had to believe it. They had gone through several life-and-death situations and still couldn't get what they wanted, but she easily took it. Sometimes, the gap between people was just that big. After knowing that that thing followed you, we all had our eyes on you. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1673. It's just that all these years, I've been acting in secret and never let him find any clues. Unfortunately, he was very cautious in doing this. Because he knew too well what kind of methods Mo Shiqian would use to deal with him once he knew that he was still alive and wanted to snatch this thing from him. Every time he made a move, he would choose the right time and make all the preparations before taking action. Until this time, when the time was right, he finally used Chu Ning to lure her over. He thought that it was foolproof and was determined to win. Unfortunately, man proposes, God disposes. In the end, he still suffered a crushing defeat. At this point, I've said everything I need to say. As the black-robed man spoke, he closed his eyes as if he could kill or cut him up at will. The surroundings were silent. Only the wind on the wasteland blew past their ears, bringing with it a hint of coldness. Chu Luyue stared at him for a while before finally digesting what he had said. After a moment, she took a step forward. The black-robed man thought that she was going to make a move and felt relieved. However, unexpectedly, Chu Luyue was not going to kill him. I have 2 more questions. If you answer truthfully, I'll send you on your way personally. The black-robed man opened his eyes and frowned. He had already said everything clearly. What else did she want to ask? However, seeing that Chu Luyue's expression did not seem to be fake, he asked patiently. What? First, back then, when you were determined to take revenge, you decided to compete with him for this thing. That means, you know what it is. Second, when you were fighting with me just now, what were you waiting for? Chu Luyue asked these 2 questions calmly. However, the black-robed man's expression changed instantly. He subconsciously looked away and frowned. After a while, he said, if you don't know what it is, how can others know? Besides, just now, you were wrong. I wasn't waiting for anything. Chu Luyue smiled. It seems that you want to go back to the Black Demon Cave to take a look. The black-robed man was furious. Unfortunately, he was at the mercy of others. No matter how aggrieved he was, there was nothing he could do. Both sides were in a stalemate. After a long while, he finally opened his mouth with difficulty. That is, whoosh. A ripping sound could be heard. The black robe on his body seemed to have been ruthlessly torn apart by an invisible blade. Rong Xiu's eyes darkened, and he immediately attacked. But it was too late. The black robe shattered at an even faster speed, turning into powder. As for the man's soul, it completely dissipated. In just a few breaths of time, the black-robed man had vanished into thin air. Not a single trace was left behind. Chu Luyue frowned. That black robe is the reason why he was able to survive for so long. Perhaps due to some reason, the black robe was destroyed on its own, and he was killed along with it. Rong Xiu's eyes flashed with a fierce look. What a pity, Chu Luyue shook his head. Anyway, we've already asked all the questions we need to ask. As for the last 2 questions, I just want to confirm his attitude. In the end, he was just a puppet. Rong Xiu looked at her. Chu Luyue's lips curved up slightly. She then looked at her surroundings and said meaningfully, this god-slaying mound, it really hides countless secrets, doesn't it? At first, she wasn't sure. But the black-robed man's reaction just now confirmed her guess. But after coming here, she didn't feel threatened. Especially after these stones stuck to her, she seemed to feel more at ease walking in the god-slaying mound. Moreover, she had finally solved a problem that had been bothering her for years. This trip was worth it. Let's go find Taizu first, then we'll leave this place after we meet up. Chu Luiyue said. Rong Xiao nodded and was about to speak, but suddenly his expression changed slightly, and he turned his head. Chu Luiyue followed his gaze and saw a few familiar figures. Her lips curled slightly, but there was no smile in her eyes. They really are haunting. Almost at the same time when Rong Xiao and Chu Luiyue looked over, Elder Wu Peng stopped in his tracks. Behind him, Nan Yuxing and the others also came to a stop. At this point, they could finally see the scene in front of them. But everything in front of them shocked them to the core. How are they still alive? Nan Yuxing was shocked and muttered in disbelief, almost suspecting that he had seen wrongly. He rubbed his eyes and looked carefully, but found that the two people were still in his line of sight. Oh no, it was 4 people. In addition to Rong Xiao and Nan Yuxing, the little girl from before also appeared. Next to her, there was a middle-aged man covered in blood and in a sorry state. From the way they interacted with each other, it seemed that they were very close to them. But in addition to these 4 people, the black-robed man from before was nowhere to be seen. Elder Wu Peng's eyes quickly swept across the scene in front of him, and his heart slowly sank. The ground was a mess, and it was clear that the battle here was intense. But Rong Xiao and the others were still standing here, and the black-robed man was nowhere to be seen. Looks like the black-robed man lost. Elder Wu Peng lowered his voice. How is that possible? Nan Yuxing instinctively retorted. He's so strong. Even if Rong Xiao and the others worked together, they wouldn't be able to defeat him. That was true. Even Elder Wu Peng himself felt that this conjecture was too absurd. But other than this answer, was there any other explanation? Then, could it be that the black-robed man suddenly showed mercy and let them go? Nan Yuxing choked. The others stopped talking. They had seen the black-robed man's attitude clearly. He would never reconcile with Rong Xiao and the others. But now, I felt that something was wrong just now. Elder Wu Peng clenched his fists. On the way here, they saw from afar that the blood-red color in the sky faded quickly, and the blood-red beam of light fell straight down, causing quite a commotion. At that time, he thought that he was overthinking, but who knew? Elder Bai Tong couldn't help but say. I think Rong Xiao and the others are a bit strange. Why don't we leave first, and then, what a coincidence, we meet again. Before Elder Bai Tong could finish his sentence, Chu Luiyue smiled and greeted the few of them. I remember that you all left before, saying that you were going to look for something, right? Why? Why did you turn back halfway? Could it be that you want to come back and see how the battle is going? With that, Chu Luiyue spread out his hands helplessly. What a pity, I seem to have disappointed you. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1674. Her words undoubtedly confirmed the guesses of Elder Wu Peng and the others. They looked at each other with sullen expressions. Although they came back for other important matters, they weren't in a good mood when they saw Rong Xiao and the others standing here safe and sound. Apart from shock, they were more puzzled. That black-robed man was a venerable god. Wasn't it a piece of cake to deal with them? What exactly happened in the middle to make the outcome turn out like this? They couldn't figure it out. They really couldn't figure it out. Nan Yi was annoyed at the sight of Chu Luiyue, and when she heard this, she was even angrier. However, before he could say anything, he was stopped by Elder Wu Peng. You've misunderstood. We're not interested in your matters. We came back here because we have something else to deal with. Chu Luyue blinked and looked around. Oh? Could it be that the thing you're looking for is here? As soon as she finished speaking, the expressions of the people opposite her changed again. This surprised Chu Luyue. She was just teasing and said it casually. Who knew that? It seemed to be true. This time, she really couldn't help but laugh. It seems that I was right. Our matters have nothing to do with you. The black-robed man's inexplicable disappearance made Elder Wu Peng secretly wary of Rong Xiao and Chu Luyue. No one knew what other trump cards they had. At this time, it was best not to provoke them. Because of this, he spoke more politely than before. Chu Luyue raised her eyebrows. Originally, she was really not interested in their matters. However, when she saw how nervous they were, she felt a little curious. These people had a strong background and had high standards. Something that they cared so much about should be an incredible treasure, right? But curiosity was one thing. She wasn't in the mood to care about their matters now. Finding Taizu was the most important thing now. Therefore, Chu Luyue didn't bother too much with them. Her lips curved slightly. It's best if we don't interfere with each other's business. We're not interested in your business, so I hope you'll take care of yourselves. After saying that, they really turned around, intending to leave. Elder Wu Peng and the others didn't believe it at first, but seeing that they were really going to leave like this, they were a little bewildered. Rong Xiao and the others. Did they really not know anything? Nan Yuxing secretly clenched his fists. Looking at their backs, a thick killing intent flashed across his eyes. Unfortunately, they were all injured, and Rong Xiao's strength was unfathomable. Otherwise, I should really let them stay here forever. He wouldn't let this matter go so easily. Once he left the god-slaying mound, he would definitely. Right. Rong Xiao paused and suddenly turned around to look at him. His deep and clear eyes landed directly on Nan Yuxing. Nan Yuxing's thoughts were instantly interrupted as he felt a chill enveloping his entire body. He couldn't help but shiver. What else do you want? He said fiercely. Rong Xiao's thin lips curled up slightly. Remember to greet Nan Yifan on behalf of I. After saying that, he turned around and continued to walk forward. Elder Wu Peng and the others were stunned and fell into a long silence. It wasn't until Rong Xiao and the others' figures gradually disappeared that Elder Bai Tong spoke in a low voice, breaking the silence. Could it be that Rong Xiao really knows the master? That wasn't the most important thing. The most important thing was that Rong Xiao's tone was too casual when he mentioned the master. It was as if he really didn't care about the master. It didn't look like he was faking it. At a time like this, what was the point of putting on an act? Unless he was really fearless. He dared to face the master directly. Nan Yuxing wanted to deny it, but he wasn't really a brainless person. He just had to think about it to know that Rong Xiao dared to do this for a reason. But why hadn't he heard father mention it before? Forget it. We'll talk about these things when we get back. Let's find the thing first and leave this place. Nan Yuxing said in frustration, but Rong Xiao's words before he left kept echoing in his ears, making him feel a little uneasy. After walking for some distance, Chu Ning looked back and asked, "What's the matter?" Who are they? It seemed that they were very hostile to you, and Rong Xiao. Chu Luyue smiled. They're just some insignificant people. You don't have to care. Chu Ning saw that she looked relaxed, as if she really didn't care about those people. Only then did he heave a sigh of relief. He patted Chu Luyue's hand gently. That's good. His palm was very wide and thick, with calluses on it. It was a little rough, but it was exceptionally warm. Suddenly, Chu Luyue was stunned and looked down. Father? Chu Ning didn't understand. Chu Luiyue grabbed his hand and looked at it for a while before asking curiously. Didn't you have a few wounds on your hand before? Why are they all gone now? She remembered clearly that those wounds were old and new, and 2 of them were especially serious. Even if he took medicine and recuperated well, according to her father's body, he would need a month to recover. But it had only been a while. Why were those wounds all gone? When Chu Ning heard that she was asking about this, he looked hesitant. In fact, he also knew that you had always been very meticulous. This matter couldn't be hidden from her for too long. It was just that, he really didn't know how to say it. Father? Chu Luiyue saw his reaction and felt even more surprised. At the same time, she was a little worried. This matter was really abnormal. Could it be that father's body? Chu Ning saw that she was worried and hurriedly said, don't worry. Actually, this situation has happened several times. I'm already used to it, several times. Hearing this, Chu Luiyue was even more shocked. Yes, that is, every time after I get injured, those wounds will recover on their own after a while. I don't know what's going on. Chu Luiyue carefully looked him up and down and was surprised to find that not only his hand, but the other wounds on his body also seemed to have recovered. This was, Rong Xiu suddenly said, Lord Chu Ning, can you let me take your pulse? Digression, 6 p.m. tomorrow, we will resume at 12 p.m. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1675. Chu Ning and Chu Luiyue glanced at each other. Chu Luiyue released his hand and asked, Do you know what's going on? Rong Xiu pondered for a moment. I'm not sure yet. As he spoke, Chu Ning had already extended his hand. Rong Xiu's well-defined fingers rested on his wrist. The surroundings were silent. Rong Xiu separated a portion of his force and injected it into Chu Ning's body. This force was like a stone thrown into a deep well, quickly disappearing in Chu Ning's body. Rong Xiu's brows moved slightly as he looked up at Chu Ning. Lord Chu Ning, your current martial artist rank is? Chu Ning's expression dimmed. Some time ago, I was seriously injured and my pill of origin was almost destroyed. My martial artist rank also fell back to rank 1. Now, I'm no different from a useless person. Ever since he was brought away from the empire of Yao Chen, he had seen countless powerhouses. From then on, he knew that his little bit of strength was actually not enough in the outside world. Under such circumstances, he was unexpectedly seriously injured and became a rank 1 martial artist. He felt very embarrassed when he said it. You had grown so well now, but he, Chu Luiyue frowned. Fell back to rank 1, Daddy must have encountered an extremely dangerous situation before. Could it be that something happened that caused his body to become like this? To be able to recover so quickly, it seems, that he's not an ordinary rank 1 martial artist. Rong Xiu released his hand and paused for a moment before asking again, Can you display a god territory now? Chu Luiyue was shocked and his eyes widened slightly. Why did Rong Xiu suddenly ask this? Daddy has already fallen back to rank 1 martial artist, how can he have a god territory? However, Chu Ning did not immediately deny it. Instead, he frowned slightly and asked with some uncertainty. Like, the ones that you summoned before? Rong Xiu nodded, yes. After a moment of silence, Chu Ning actually nodded. I think, there have been 2. But at that time, I didn't know what it was, and it soon disappeared again. As he spoke, he hesitantly raised his hand. A streak of azure light slowly flew out. Chu Luiyue's heart suddenly jumped. This was actually a divine domain. Even though she had seen many storms and waves, when she saw this scene at this time, she was still shocked on the spot and was unable to recover for a long time. Just a second ago, she was still immersed in the sad atmosphere of her father falling back to a rank 1 warrior, and in the blink of an eye, she saw him summoning a divine territory. Who would be able to endure such a drop in status? Chu Luiyue forcefully closed his eyes. When he opened his eyes again, the divine domain was still lingering around Chu Ning and had not disappeared. Her throat tightened as she struggled to speak. This is... Father, your divine domain? Chu Luiyue's voice was floating when she said these few words. Chu Ning nodded. Previously, I didn't know what this was. It was only when I saw you fight with that person today that I found out that this was the divine region. Chu Ning really didn't know anything about this. When his strength reached its peak in the past, he was only a rank 5 warrior in the empire of Yaochen. And this strength was definitely considered top-notch in the entire empire of Yaochen. However, a divine domain could only be obtained after breaking through a rank 9 warrior and successfully becoming a god-rank powerhouse. How did he have the chance to know this? At most, he had only seen this term a few times in some biographies. However, to him, those were things that were extremely far away. He would never have thought that one day, he would actually possess a divine domain. Especially since his current strength was only at the first stage of the warrior realm. If he hadn't seen it with his own eyes today, he would never have thought of himself. Looking at Chu Ning's blank face, Chu Luiyue was speechless. She suddenly felt that she was really not enough in front of her father. What was the big deal about being able to fight above his level? What was the big deal about being able to contract with a divine beast? Her father had become a rank 1 warrior and had a divine domain. What kind of operation was this? Chu Luiyue really didn't understand. In the past, it was only others who called her a pervert. Now, she felt that compared to her father, she was really inferior. Sensing the strange gazes of the few people, Chu Ning felt a little awkward. Actually, I don't know what's going on either. It's just that after I was injured that time, when I woke up again, it became like this. At that time, he was still sad for a long time because of the fall in his strength and didn't think about what this thing was at all. As expected. Rong Xiu's face revealed a look of relief as his thin lips curled up slightly. I still have to congratulate Lord Chu Ning for obtaining such an opportunity. Opportunity? Chu Luiyue and Chu Ning asked in unison. Rong Xiu nodded. If I'm not wrong, Lord Chu Ning should have obtained the indestructible divine body by chance. Chu Luiyue was shocked. Indestructible divine body. She had heard of this before. A few years ago at Lingxiao College, after she broke through to the divine level, she had been thinking about condensing a divine body. However, this matter was very complicated. Many divine level powerhouses, even after crossing the threshold of the divine level, could not condense their own divine body in their lifetime. At that time, she didn't know what kind of divine body was most suitable for her, so she searched through Lingxiao College's library. She remembered that in an ancient scroll, there was a record of this divine body. The so-called indestructible divine body was an extremely special divine body. For ordinary cultivators, their original body and divine body were separated. However, cultivators with the indestructible divine body could directly change their own body into a divine body. In other words, such cultivators would only have one body from the beginning to the end. Compared to other cultivators who could separate divine bodies, this was indeed a disadvantage. However, the indestructible divine body had an incomparable advantage. This divine body had extremely tenacious vitality. As long as there was still a breath left, it could quickly recover. Chu Luiyue looked at Chu Ning. Previously, he had so many terrible wounds on his body, and they were serious. However, in this short period of time, those wounds had completely healed, and even a scar was hard to see. This was the indestructible divine body? But father is only a stage 1 warrior now, how could? Rong Xiu smiled and explained. Lord Chu Ning did not break through on his own, but he accidentally obtained some kind of opportunity and obtained the indestructible divine body. His original strength was not compatible with this. So I think that when he obtained the indestructible divine body, he automatically lowered his strength to that of a stage 1 warrior to make it easier for him to cultivate again. Also, Lord Chu Ning's Yuan Meridian level has been changed to the Tianjing Yuan Meridian. Rong Xiao raised his chin as he spoke. You can check his pulse yourself. Chu Luyue actually believed his words, but she still could not help but go forward and check Chu Ning's pulse. After a moment, she released her hand with a shocked expression. When she looked at Chu Ning again, her gaze was very different from before. It really is the Tianjing Yuan Meridian. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. You're tuning in to the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.